So that is working well. We're going to augment that pump station system. But again, given the rainfall that happened first for last 2 weeks ago, then over the weekend, there's only so much we can pump because it's flooding everywhere right now.
My other question has to do with retaining walls and the degree to which we understand and are, focusing on certain areas that potentially are more problematic, where we've had challenges in the past, let's say geotechnical. Do we also have the capacity through staff or other resources to be able to manage that? Should it become critical?
Thank you, Councilor Anderson. Yeah, in the 12 years I've been here, there's definitely a number of known sections which have had material movements over the years. There's a number of remonitoring, like 56th Avenue comes to mind between 232nd and 244th. There's been a number of projects over the years, including engineered retaining walls, slope repairs. The recent slope failure across from Pagoda Golf Course on 264th Street, again, is an example of material moving down the slope when heavy rains occur. And township crews themselves, pursuant to geotechnical advice, build a temporary debris retaining wall should there any additional slope failure occur that would prevent the material from going down all the way down the hill. And then we're still working on the permanent repair solution.
Mayor Froese.
Thank you. Just a question regarding any mutual aid from any of the surrounding municipalities. Have any surrounding municipalities asked for mutual aid? And if so, what's happened? And have we offered? I know the Abbotsford has the Army there, so they're helping out quite a bit. And I just want to know if there's any other requirements. I know Surrey seems to have things under control, a little bit of flooding, and I don't know about other side of the river, and other municipalities. Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor Froese. We have received the occasional request to Southwest PREOC, or EMBC, who are overseeing the entire provincial response, to provide assistance in the EOC itself in different municipalities. And so far, I'm not sure if we've mobilized anybody, but the requests have gone out. However, when those requests come in, they also filled pretty quickly. So I think people are ready and eager to fulfill those positions. And of course, we are still currently activated our own EOC right now.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any other questions. Thank you very much for that update, and also to all the staff and crews who are doing the work to keep our community safe during this crazy weather event. So the first item on the agenda is the Willoughby Neighbourhood Plan. This motion was referred at the July 13, 2020 regular council meeting. Councillor Arneson, as you moved the motion, did you wish to begin the discussion?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I had not prepared a number of notes, but I would put forward from the perspective, and interestingly, more than a year later, discussing this, I think that one of the things that's happened is there is even more concrete alignment between potentially the plan for the Willoughby neighborhoods that have taken place over a number of decades. I have a copy here that I referred to. So the Willoughby Community Plan itself, the last neighborhood, as we know, that we endorsed was the Williams Neighborhood Plan. But when I look at this text format in paper, it clearly indicates, even at that point, that this was something that hadn't been addressed. And if you look at the map, it's an appendix to this whole document. And it indicates that there are very few opportunities that were advanced in those days for mixed use in Willoughby. I think our challenge would be, if I can say, sort of distill to where we are now, that we've built out quite a bit in most of our neighborhoods. And therefore, it would be a limiting factor, I would say, to understand the nature of the infrastructure and the range of populations we could consider with respect to additional residential use on the mixed use and commercial properties that we could advance. However, I do think it's a viable project to go forward, and limiting the scope perhaps and the timeline and the cost from a staff perspective, either through our own staff or a consultant, to review the plan and see what opportunities either exist or could exist based on council's will to make a determination about mixed use. I think the majority of council recognizes that there is abundant evidence that mixed use is a good opportunity to allow people to live in and around where they work, which limits the use of cars and therefore has a good effect on our climate action plan. So there are a lot of positives, but on the other hand, I think from my point of view, it would be necessary to give direction or have discussion with staff, as I said, to the scope of this review, because if there are limitations, I wouldn't want a full-scale review of this if it were to be proven that there's not really a lot of opportunity. So I'd highlight there could be advancements in this area, but I think this will come down to referring this to staff in a more substantial kind of way to find out what that would look like. Implications for schools, parks, many other things, infrastructure, detention ponds, and all of these things are like a moving target. So I think we need to also take that into account. So those are my comments about this as a proposal. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Arneson. Got a couple questions. One from Councillor Whitmarsh.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I had a question through the chair to staff on this. What is the level of development completion of this neighborhood plan so far? And sort of, is there some kind of percentage or some kind of idea that we could have of where we're at in terms of completion of the neighborhood plan, what's left to go? And, you know, if we were to do some kind of review like this, what kind of impact could it have at this stage of development in the Willoughby neighborhood plan? Maybe just a question through to staff.
Mr. Backen?
Madam Chair, I'd ask Mr. Chu, our Manager of Community and Policy Planning, who may have a better idea of those exact numbers. Also, staff does, Madam Chair, have a brief presentation if council would like to avail itself of that.
Okay, wonderful. Yes, we would.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Thank you for the question. We have 10 neighborhood plans in Willoughby. They've been completed over the last 20 years. And in terms of level of development, we're roughly at the midpoint of development. Based on our estimate, the build-out population for Willoughby is about 100,000. And right now we're looking at about 50,000 mark.
Does anyone have any questions? Council? Oh, go ahead.
Clarification on that.
Sure.
Well, maybe there's coverage in the presentation, so there's 10. You indicated 10 neighborhood plans. So this is this review that we had on here was the idea was to review all 10 neighborhood plans. Is that how staff understood that this was being done?
I think based on the wording of the motion, I think the answer would be yes. Short answer would be yes. Existing neighborhood plans.
Okay, that's helpful. I'll maybe wait and see what information comes from the presentation.
So I'm just wondering if we should, just asking council if we should have the presentation. I see there's a few more questions. Should we have the presentation first? Yeah? Is that unanimous? No? Oh, Councillor Richter would like to ask a question.
Well, Councillor Ferguson has his hand up, or had his hand up before I put mine up.
Councillor. Okay, Councillor Ferguson will wait. Go ahead, Councillor Richter.
Okay, I want to know when we determined that the build-out population of Willoughby would be 100,000. The last number I had was 68,000. That's a substantial jump.
Yeah. Thank you for the question. The initial Willoughby community plan projected 68,000. That was at the beginning of the whole planning process. And since then, because of changes in things like the BC building code, which allowed 4 stories wood frame at the beginning, and now we're looking at 6-story wood frame. And in addition, we have actually made some plan amendments to allow for some higher density development, mostly in the Corvallis area and around the Willoughby Town Center area.
Okay, but did council actually pass a motion saying we accept 100,000 population for Willoughby? Because I don't recall that. And I would think that's an important enough point that council should have discussed and voted on.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I don't think there is an explicit council motion to change the build-out for Willoughby. But by way of amendments to the various neighborhood plans, and in turn, the community plan, those amendments had implications on the final build-out.
Okay, then the whole point of 100,000 total population up there needs to be discussed. Perhaps we'll do that today then. Thank you.
Right. So should we have that presentation? Councillor Ferguson, your hand's still up. Okay.
Jason, as part of the presentation, is there any way to provide an estimate of how far the build-out is by neighborhood? For example, I think some neighborhoods are much more substantially advanced than others, Smith being just starting, whereas Yorkson or some others, Northeast Gordon, may be at a much higher significant population.
Definitely, I can provide additional annotation throughout the presentation.
And then as well, perhaps in terms of the build-out projections, quite often these projections have estimates that are significant in terms of population, but the developers don't build to those levels. Perhaps any comments you could make about what as a percentage overall, what we're seeing the build-out to actually be.
Madam Chair, this presentation provides straight information on a possible review of the existing neighborhood plans for mixed-use developments in Willoughby. So this presentation will basically focus on some background information, and I'll outline the policy framework for mixed use, and then we'll get into some case studies in terms of where we're anticipating mixed use based on the existing community plan and neighborhood plans. So the genesis of this presentation has to do with a motion that appears on the first page of the agenda package for today. Again, generally, the motion talks about the potential need for the township to review existing neighborhood plans in order to expand mixed-use opportunities in Willoughby. And the motion was referred to a future CPC meeting. So in terms of policy framework for mixed use, we'll quickly go over the Metro Vancouver Regional Growth Strategy, the Township OCP, as well as the Willoughby Community Plan. Mixed residential commercial developments are generally permitted in the general urban designation of the RGS, the Regional Growth Strategy. General urban areas are shown in light gray on this map. General urban areas are intended for residential neighborhoods and centers and are intended to support shopping, services, institutions, recreation facilities, and parks. Within general urban areas, higher density development is to be directed to urban centers and frequent transit development areas. General urban areas are intended to emphasize placemaking and enriched public realm and promote transit-oriented communities where transit, multiple occupancy vehicles, cycling, and walking are the preferred modes of transportation. So just to look at some of the centers here, this is a map in the RGS. We have 3 urban centers in the township. The first one is what they call Langley Center, and this is actually basically generally the Willowbrook area, together with parts of the Langley City downtown. The other urban center is the Willoughby Town Center area, as well as the Aldergrove downtown. So again, the three red dots show the urban centers in the RGS from a Metro Vancouver perspective. Now, in the Township OCP, this is actually Table 2 in the OCP. We try to define the urban community structure and centers based on the Metro Vancouver RGS. These urban centers are regional center, town centers, community centers, neighborhood centers, and frequent transit development area. This is also from our OCP. As you can see, the square shows the urban regional center, and again, that's Willowbrook. And the two town centers in Willoughby and Aldergrove downtown. And we have some community centers like the one in Walnut Grove, Fort Langley, Murrayville, and Brookswood. And Carville is a frequent transit development area. So that's basically the structure that we see. And again, the structure is also consistent with the Metro Vancouver RGS. This is a quick diagram to show the planning work that we have done in Willoughby. We started planning for the Willoughby Community Plan back in 1998. And as mentioned, the last plan for Williams was adopted by Council in 2018. We have made amendments to some of these plans. For example, we updated the Yorkson Plan back in 2008, and it was initially adopted by Council in 2001. Another example was Carville. The plan was first adopted in 2001, and it was later updated in 2013. So here you can see actually the 10 names of the neighborhood plans and sub-neighborhood plan in the case for Jericho. In the Willoughby Community Plan, we have 3 designations where mixed-use developments are permitted. And they are commercial, mixed-use, and neighborhood commercial. And within these designations, they can be residential commercial mix or commercial office mix. In the commercial designation, we have several areas as shown in solid red, outlined with a black line. First of all, the town center, that's supposed to be Willoughby's downtown, and we're seeing that the downtown is taking shape. This is an area where mixed use is permitted, and again, in the regional growth strategy, it is designated as a municipal town center. And another area is the gateway area in Carville. It's just basically the interchange area at the very top of the map. It is intended for a wide mix of regionally serving land uses, including hotels, offices, and retail commercial. In the RGS, it is again designated as an FTDA, Frequent Transit Development Area. Along 200th Street, just south of the interchange, it is also designated commercial. And we permit a mix of high-density residential, offices, and retail commercial. And that designation is mostly on the east side of 200th Street. And what we see going up is basically what they call Latimer Heights on the east side of 200th Street. And that's what we see as commercial in that area. And it is designated partially as an FTDA because it's close to the Carville bus exchange and urban on the east side of the street. We also have Williams on the map. In Williams, the plan permits a mix of land uses, including hotels, offices, and retail commercial. and it is designated mixed employment in the RGS. And you will see 3 smaller commercial nodes. We have 200th Street and 72nd, and that's the jet ski building as a real-life example. Also at 200th and 80th, we have a commercial node, as well as 88th and 204th Street, and that's actually on the north side of the freeway, but that node is included as part of the Willoughby community. In terms of mixed commercial, we have 3 nodes, and they're shown in a lighter red, also bounded by the thick black line. We have 3 locations, high-density mixed use in Jericho, and that's basically across the street from the LEC. That area is permitted to have a mix of commercial, multifamily residential, and or institutional development consistent with the campus of care concept that's in the Willoughby, in the Jericho sub-neighborhood plan. And the bigger circle towards the top of the map is the Transit Village in Corvallis. In the Transit Village, again, we permit retail, commercial, high-density residential, institutional, and public amenities space. And the third node, mixed-use node, is heritage mixed use. And that's located at 208th and 83rd Avenue. That area was a special development permit area designed to basically work with the existing Willoughby Community Hall. And when we were updating the Yorkson plan, we were also anticipating potential relocation of heritage buildings from the rest of Willoughby to that area. But with the development applications that we have considered, we did not have the need to relocate to that general location. But in any event, it is still developed as a mixed use consistent with the heritage character of the area. And I can get into that in one of our case studies. This third map is actually a map showing the proposed neighborhood commercial locations in the various plans. And you see a smattering of stars in these areas, with a bigger star actually in the heart of Smith, simply because at that point, based on community feedback, there was a greater need for some more commercial capacity in the Smith neighborhood. But the key thing to look at on this map is the neighborhood commercial centers calibrated to fit the 5-minute walk shed within most of the residential neighborhoods in these neighborhoods. This is just basically putting all the 3 maps together to show the commercial designations, mixed-use designations, as well as the neighborhood designations. You will see that there isn't that much red towards the south of the community, namely in the southeast Gordon, as well as Routley. Simply because those were the 2 neighborhoods that went ahead first without the benefit of smart growth thinking, for example. And there's also the gravity of the big box retail down in this area with Walmart and other larger grocery retail. So that's basically kind of a quick observation for this map. Getting into the case studies, the first one that we offer is at the intersection of 72nd and 208th, basically the north side of the intersection. But with this one, case study 1A, we are showing the northwest corner. It is designated neighborhood commercial, but it permits a 1-story commercial development with the intent to preserve the view corridor along the blue link at this location. So that was the primary planning rationale for a 1-story commercial in this particular neighborhood commercial node. Now, across the street at the northeast corner, it is also designated neighborhood commercial. and it permits a mix of uses, commercial on the ground floor and up to 2 stories of residential above, or 2 stories with some commercial or offices above. And the 2-story is basically trying to be consistent or to respect the townhouse designation just to the north and east in terms of scale and interface. Now, my third case study, I call it case study 2, is also in Smith, but this is further north on 208th and 76. The area is designated neighborhood commercial in the Willoughby Community Plan and the Smith Neighborhood Plan. The Smith NP permits mixed-use commercial and residential development, with commercial uses on the ground floor and up to 2 stories of residential use above. However, 2-story commercial development will also be permitted. The intent of the neighborhood commercial designation at this location is to provide convenience commercial shopping on the east side of 208th. It would also serve students from the proposed middle and high school to the east. The Smith NP provides an option to provide residential on 2nd and or 3rd story due to the close proximity of apartment and mixed-use commercial residential buildings across 208th to the south, just further down on 208th Street. Now, so this is case study number 3. This is the Yorkson mixed-use example I mentioned earlier. This is a development permit area, and the objective of the DP area is to encourage a pedestrian-oriented mixed-use node that is compatible with existing heritage buildings. But right now, we're still looking at the one building that's been around for quite some time, the Willoughby Community Hall. It also permits commercial uses on the ground floor with a mix of commercial or multifamily residential uses on upper floors. The building height is actually 3 to 6 stories. So if you look at the map, the thick dotted black lines show the limit where 6-story mixed-use buildings are permitted. The other areas, because they're so close to some single-family developments, the building height's limited to 3 stories. And the area is still partially developed. Actually, with all the case studies examples, they are largely undeveloped, still in a greenfield kind of state. And that's one of the reasons why we picked these examples. That's the end of my presentation, but I can go back to the slide where we show the various neighborhoods, and we can talk briefly about the state of each neighborhood in terms of build out.
I don't have the whole list of, so I can't see if there's anyone that has any questions. Here? There we go. Okay. Sorry?
I'd like to have Mr. Chu continue.
Okay, sure.
So shortly after the Willoughby plan was adopted by Council back in 1998, Council directed staff to work on the Southwest Gordon neighborhood plan. Southwest Gordon is the first neighborhood that we had planning and development in the Willoughby area. And I would say that area is basically 95+% built out. The second neighborhood is Rutley. It's the same kind of status, about 95% built out, with some landowners who opted to stay on the land for quite some time yet. And Yorkson is under active development, and that neighborhood is now over 50% built out with the new school that was built. We unlocked the development of the southwest corner of Yorkson. Northeast Gordon Estate is partially built out. I would say it's more than 50%. I don't have the exact number, but I would I would say it's between 50 to 60% built out in that area. The area that is not developed is actually on the west side of 208th and also north of 72nd in the special study area. Jericho is by and large undeveloped at this stage, although we have some active development applications. Council also approved the first tower of a care facility. I believe it was either 16 or 18 stories with a lot of residents in that area. Central Gordon is just getting started. I'd say it's about 20 to 25% built out. And Latimer is about 30 to 40% built out or under application, under construction. And Smith has not been started. Same for Williams, although we've approved one application that permits some employment uses in the Williams area. And we have some active applications. Madam Chair, at this point, this is purely the brain of one planner. I would invite my counterpart, Mr. Richardson, to maybe even augment some of my response to the committee, simply because he may identify some of the existing applications that I may have missed.
Thank you, Mr. Chu. Do you have any comment on Carvolth?
Oh, yes. So for Carvolth, it is roughly 50% built out on the east side of 200th Street. Built out meaning, in my mind, is either under construction, in stream, or ready for occupancy. Now, the other half of Carvolth that is not developed on the west side would not have residential capacity because that area is purely for employment uses or a mix of uses, with some very small exceptions where council has approved an application for. No, that triangle is not in Carvolth. It's in Latimer. Sorry.
And Jason, if one were to look at those communities that have built out, what percentage of them are reaching the density totals that we thought? So for example, if one community was to be 100 units, I don't think we're seeing 100 units, we're seeing something less than that at the build out. Overall, what percentage of that build out are we seeing?
Actually, generally in single family areas, we're seeing a little bit of undercapacity, whereas in the high density areas, like Willoughby Town Center, again, because of the change from 4-story wood frame to 6-story wood frame, we're seeing higher capacity than originally planned back in 1998.
I have a question. You mentioned that in 2001 to 2013 that the Carvolth plan was updated. What sort of things, what kind of details would be updated? What kind of changes would be made to a plan over the course of 13 years?
Well, at the very beginning, we were asked to do the Carvolth plan to facilitate the redevelopment of the interchange. And the planning area was actually much smaller than what we're seeing today. The plan was, again, to allow the project to basically put some valuations on the lands in the traditional cloverleaves area. And as a result of community input, landowners on the east side of Carvolth, basically between 201 and 204, came to council and asked council to expand the planning area to include them. So we updated the plan to include some employment capacities in that specific area. But because of the changes again, because of the development of the Carvolth Exchange, Council decided to update the plan yet again, but at this time converting some employment lands back to residential uses to create a transit village for that area directly south of the transit exchange.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I have a couple questions. I'm not sure if it was Councillor Davis or Councillor Richter that was first, though. So. Okay, Councillor Richter.
Yes, I wonder if we could get the population estimates or approved totals for each of these communities.
Yes, we can definitely provide that because we are constantly updating the information for various traffic studies, engineering studies, so we can make that available.
Yeah, I really think council needs to see that because we've basically densified by 40,000 people in Willoughby. We already have a lot of issues about livability in Willoughby right now. I can't imagine how much more intense those concerns are going to become when we've gone from a population of 68,000 to 100,000. I'm still shocked by that 100,000 number, and I'd like to know the distribution amongst these neighborhoods. Thanks.
Councillor Davis?
Well, you can hear me. I kind of wish I'd gone first because Councillor Richter screwed up my whole thing here. The population projections, okay, now I've said that. When we have a plan in Willoughby, like when we have an application, we upzone it. It seems like we're always changing the density. And when we change the density, it's hard for us to kind of keep up because it's not like we have a plan. Well, if that goes up, well, this has to go up, but we have to, if there's more people, we have to have more sidewalks, you know, like there's no, when we kind of council, when we approve higher density, we inadvertently make it a better place to develop, but it also for the developer, but not necessarily for the community. And I guess where it's maybe not a question, but what can we learn from Brookswood? What can we learn from Willoughby that we're going to do with Brookswood? Because if we did, and I don't like, it hasn't absorbed yet. I didn't hear the 68,000. I just heard it this morning. I've always heard the projections that the mayor said, Mayor Froese has said that Willoughby will be, but I didn't realize that we've. So every time we make I should start to think here. Every time we upzone something, we change the plan. So there's a lot of plans in there, and if like a Southwest, you said 95, Routley was 95. You know, you got Yorkson at 50 roughly. I don't quote me. I'm not quoting you either, but I mean, there's lots. 25. Latimer was 30%. Smith isn't really. You know, there's a few in the turnkey for Williams, but if we think we're going to end up with 100, maybe we might end up a lot more in the end because of the way we change it. So maybe anyhow, I guess all I'm doing is making a comment that maybe we should stick to the plan. Sometimes the plan works, and when we change the plan, are we changing it as council for the better of the community, or like really who benefits? Because it sounds like maybe we don't always benefit. And as a planner, you know, you see things come in and it's hard on you to, anyhow, I guess I've gone on long enough. We maybe sometimes should stick to the plan. Things work a little better sometimes when that happens. Thank you.
Councillor Ferguson?
Madam Chair, if I could respond, because
Oh.
there was some very good points were
Okay.
raised, and I know Councillor Ferguson has some thoughtful comments as well. The suggestion was made about the benefit for developers. I don't think the planning staff look at it in that context. They look at it in the context of our overall community plan, our sustainability strategies, and our transportation strategies. So for example, some of the densities we're seeing on the corridors, not overall, but on the corridors themselves, lend themselves to transit or high transit areas. A good example would be Brookswood by contrast. The plans call for much, much less density in Brookswood because that's what the planning process has dictated. That comes at a cost, and that cost will be there will be highly unlikely there's any rapid transit corridors in Brookswood. Instead, it'll be traditional transit corridors or even less. It may be more of a car-driven community. So what we've learned, I guess, is that the density dictates transit, which does dictate people's ability or affects their lives greatly, and that is a benefit, but it could also be at a cost of some of the higher densities we're actually seeing. The overall density targets, Mr. Chu has been quite correct in terms of reminding us that the single-family lots, which are becoming very expensive, are not being developed in the quantity that we thought, whereas the more affordable units, going, say, from 4 to 6 story, are being developed the way we thought. And in fact, we're seeing smaller units because of the affordability. Nowadays, 1,000 square foot unit is rare. It's not rare, but it's not common because of the cost associated with that. We're seeing 600, 700, 800 square foot units as being the norm, which is something we wouldn't have thought of back in 1998. We would have said that was ridiculously small. So those factors, affordability, transportation, sustainability, are all driving the planning exercises we're seeing now, which do impact the overall density in some areas. But as Mr. Chu actually pointed out, some of those areas that are still to develop are going to be commercial or industrial. Where we're going with all this, though, is trying to take us back to the original referral, and I'm just hearing council, and we haven't heard from the rest of council as well, is that where should this end up? And I'll plant a seed. Perhaps it ends up with a referral back to staff to look at the process and consequences to change or to include in the commercial areas mixed use designations, because I think that's something that can have some positives in terms of helping some of the transit corridors, but as you pointed out, also have a cost which could actually bump the densities up a little bit as well.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. A couple more questions. Councillor Ferguson?
Yes, thank you. I'm glad to see that the administrator was fair enough to think that my thoughtful comments would be useful, or which indeed are debatable. And also, Mr. Chu, I was very happy to see that you brought up 1998, a time I wasn't on council, so that's important to note that I am not responsible for this plan. Okay, so it's funny, I know we're talking about Willoughby, but things like came up like Brookswood and things came up like some other like industrial and commercial areas and other thing. I did, and also regional growth strategy. I did want to say, and regardless of the new amendment that was put to the board of directors of Metro Vancouver, it's going back even further than that. We live in an area which we are really affected by our neighbors. I mean, let's face it, our unfortunate situations in Abbotsford with nature, never mind densities or they put an awful lot of houses on those hills, I think, which that's part of their, the reason why they are in council. But if you go up in a helicopter and look at what surrounds Langley, we're surrounded by density all around us. Go up to Campbell Heights now. People, if you haven't been there, you'd be just shocked by how much industrial land has been developed there. It's incomprehensible. The thousands and thousands of square feet of industrial land just pushed there. That has an impact. You look at Abbotsford, the amount of people they put in there. Look at Surrey. And, how to get through, how Langley is, we're like a leapfrog. And we are going to be the least dense population in the region, I think. Regional, I'm talking about Surrey on one side, Abbotsford on the other, U.S. border. A lot of people, not necessarily right there, but in the United States itself. So what I'm getting at is that I think density, growth, and the number of people is important to note. And I don't have an instant answer. I know that, the question was asked 68 or 100. I mean, if you look at, and it's true about the, 500 square feet at 800 square feet. And if you look now at I guess Langley's first tower going up there, is it, but I think is that Latimer or something like that? Or
The first two towers that are under construction are in Carville, actually.
Carville,
just,
yeah.
south
so
of
that Carville's up
86th
there.
Avenue.
Yeah, so yeah. And I know my daughters even and her fiance are certainly looking at buying there. And it's not and the amount of money they want for these type of units, but in a way they're able to build a complete community, which is that is an example of mixed use. They're going to have some mixed use there. So I guess what it comes down to is that as we proceed forward, these plans are living plans and densities are important. Now, back to mixed use, because that's actually on the agenda today. So the thing is, lots of times when there is a piece of land, a piece of property, the applicant has sometimes a choice, sometimes not a choice to put the mixed use in. Under today's current market, mixed uses usually, this is my question, aren't that popular. Is that not correct, Mr. Chu?
Actually, when we first started planning Willoughby, mixed use was not a popular thing amongst developers because we did not have enough population base to support those new commercial units. Mm-hmm. So developers shied away from providing mixed use development simply because back in 1998, the Willoughby community plan was looking at an average overall density of about 6 units to an acre. Mm-hmm. Right now, the amended Willoughby community plan is looking at about 22 units per acre, much higher density, and that means more consumers and other people to support those commercial establishments.
Okay, and also, if I may, the applicants, the business folk, they're either going to build all residential or all commercial. They don't like to fiddle around with the both, and I've heard that also through discussions in the past as well, depending on how high you want to go up as well.
Yeah, again, we're seeing some changes. I think we have at least one development application that is looking at providing additional commercial space than what the plan specifies. So some developers are seeing actually some opportunities in providing commercial and office uses in the mixed-use development.
And my final question, well, I guess will be more as this time goes by, is now they've changed a building code that you can go up higher with wood. Has that provided any other type of incentive for builders to do otherwise, if I may?
I don't think I have further numbers to answer the question in a reasonable manner, but I think the trend is going higher. If council recalls, we are now trying to entertain what we call large timber development, mm-hmm. which is more than 6 stories now, with the wood construction techniques. So the trend is going up towards that end, up to about maybe 12-story wood mm-hmm. frame.
Yeah, I just comment on that. I mean, I always used to like to sometimes use an example, going back about 6 years or so, maybe 8 years, is that some of the folks in the Willoughby area, Willoughby Town Center and around that area, would have rather go higher, but they didn't have the opportunity because of the building codes and things like that. But that's just a comment. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Arneson.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. It's an interesting and obviously a complex conversation, and I really appreciate Mr. Backen's comments about the potential for council to consider referring this back to staff for more information, talk about the implications. But Mr. Chu, since you're here, and either yourself or someone from staff hopefully can address this comment, I'm wondering, and this may sound very simplistic under the circumstances, but it seems to me that you have listed a number of these different neighborhood plans that are currently, I'll call them undeveloped or uncompleted at this point. And so, in development permit areas, I'm wondering the consideration for doing that. The logic that I have in my mind is, as whatever the population is, if we've allowed more density and have more people there and need more services, these opportunities for ground floor leaseholds for institutional uses and other things. I'm reminded of the Childcare Action Plan. You know, these are opportunities I feel that somebody could come along as a proponent and say, well, I'm making this building, but on the ground floor, I'd like to be able to provide this. And it could be services for seniors, it could be for childcare, it could be for many things. And so the idea for me is that we, by default, are not allowing any kind of advance of services that are in and around where these areas are. I'm not saying that our plan doesn't account for that, but to create more of the services within those particular areas where we know the population is going to be, it seems like a natural corollary to having more density. And I'm not weighing in on if we should have more or less people there, but it seems to me if we're already above what we anticipated, that it would be a good balancing to consider what kind of opportunities are we allowing on these ground floor situations for people to avail themselves of needed services in that area without having to go very far to get them. And I guess from a brass tacks point of view, I don't know if you'd have any idea off the top of your head, but just this idea that there could be a review at a minimum cost and how much staff time that would take. Does that require a more detailed scope before you could advance that kind of answer, or do we know enough now? Okay.
Well, it would be helpful for us to, obtain a direction from council to basically define specifically what areas we would like to look at and what kind of planning work and also community engagement activities. Then we can provide council with a more detailed estimate of the scope and time and resources.
And just one more thing, it may not be easy to determine, but at this point, with the way, the trajectory that we have in terms of development heights and densities, et cetera, for the known capacity that we have, could it be possible that we really don't change a lot about these plans, except for the fact that there's an allowance that's written in there? I know we'll change parking and a few other things, but just for this other component that would be on the ground floor.
Actually, within the existing commercial capacity, we would allow or consider amendments to the various plans to allow institutional uses in these strata commercial units. The entire commercial scene is actually changing simply because of e-commerce. And, with the experience of COVID, people are ordering things online, so there might not be as great a need for commercial retail units. So I think some of the newer plants allow that flexibility, as I've mentioned in some of the places. And we're also witnessing some development applications that come in with that kind of proposal. It's basically civic institutional uses.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Whitmarsh.
Thanks, Mr. Chu, for the discussion and presentation today. It's really helpful. It's clear to me that, since 1998, the desire for what we want in our communities has changed quite significantly in 23 years. Even my time on council being 7 years, I've noticed a significant difference in the community's favor towards things like density of their communities. Walkable communities have become more important to people. The idea of transit and public transit, and particularly with the transit exchange, SkyTrain and those things coming to Langley at some point in the near future, is also significant. And I think the third issue that Mr. Backen mentioned is affordable housing. And unless we continue to expand and enhance the supply of housing, we will never deal with affordable housing. All sorts of concepts can be put in place, but unless you actually supply homes for people to live in. And in many ways, the size of the buildings hasn't changed, but as Mr. Backen highlighted as well, that the size of the units has changed, so the actual footprint of the building might in fact be the same. So to me, it's great that these are living documents, and certainly I would expect that as we deal with these issues of transit and affordability, that the population density would increase, and the amount of population coming to Willoughby would increase. In fact, I would be very disappointed if, in fact, we didn't increase the numbers to accommodate and try and deal with some of these really important factors that we have in our community. So that was just the comments. What I was wondering, though, as a question to you, was when we in each of these 10 neighborhoods, and when we do look at expanding the size of the area and so on, is it such that that council is made aware of that this will increase the number in this particular neighborhood by a certain amount, and has council through the years sort of accepted those increases for each neighborhood as we've made adjustments?
Well, in some cases, we pinpoint the implications of some of these upzoning proposals. In others, because they're general in nature, we did not do so.
Okay. Well, that's good to know in some cases. I think that it's clear that we're, it just automatically does increase.
If I may amend my,
Yes,
my
sure.
comments or answer for the last question, when we do the neighborhood plans, we have a companion document called Engineering Servicing Plan. That's when we look at the capacity to service the increased population. So, we would know the impact on traffic, on water and sewer, and other things like that. So I'd say we're able to accommodate the additional density based on the successive engineering servicing plan that we have done for the last few neighborhood plans.
Great, thank you. Just in the area of this of mixed use, I appreciated the sort of the highlights that you gave us in terms of mixed use opportunities in Willoughby. For me, when I look at the specific plan review, I guess rather than a full plan review, for me, I'd personally rather refer it to staff to come back just with a bit more of a discussion around mixed use specifically, and what other opportunities there might be available beyond what you talked about today that we could maybe look at to expand mixed use, because certainly the idea of mixed use has become more of a discussion in the community, and I think there might be some other opportunities. So that's probably where I'd be rather than a full review. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Richter.
Yes, thanks. Again, I'm coming back to the 100,000 people. The corollary to going from 68,000 to 100,000 is the cost of government that has to go along with that. So one of the things that I would like to get, in addition to the original proposed densities in each of these 10 areas, the anticipated densities in each of these 10 areas, I'd also like to know what the cost of municipal government per capita has been in the township from the year 2000 to the year 2021. We could probably just use 3 benchmark years, maybe 2000, 2010, and 2020 or 2021. Because it seems to me that this is a bit of a vicious cycle. We're not anticipating the demands, the cost of those demands for the increased densities when we're going through our budget process. And at some point, I think we're going to reach the stage where we're going to have to start saying no to increased densities. And the whole idea that, because Mr. Backen had mentioned that we could refer this back to staff to include more mixed use, but that would increase densities. Well, how much? Are we going to be adding like another 50,000 people to it? If we went mixed use, we've got to get a handle on this. We've got to get a handle on the rate of growth, and we've got to get a handle on the cost of that rate of growth. So I would like to request that costs also be taken into consideration, and the very baseline cost is just simply the cost of municipal government in the township per capita.
Any comments from staff, or do we just, okay. Okay, thank you. Councillor Woodward.
Yeah, thanks. Can everybody hear me all right? It's the first time I've spoken today.
Yeah, yeah, we can hear you.
All right, thanks. Yeah, rather than make me leave Mr. Chu standing there, maybe the screen can be unshared. I've seen that for long enough. Maybe I don't have any questions for Mr. Chu, but I did want to start contributing to the debate. But I don't have any questions for staff, so I don't know if that can wrap up and then we can get back to council discussion.
Mr. Backen?
So I think the suggestion is if there's no more questions from council of Mr. Chu, he can stand down and then council can enter into some sort of discussion and hopefully ultimately provide a resolution as to their desired direction.
Sure. I don't see any more questions. Thank you very much, Mr. Chu, for your presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Woodward? We can't hear you, or you're on mute.
Yeah, oh, certainly. I appreciate that. Sure, I can jump in. I mean, I certainly appreciate the intent behind the motion, but I'm gonna express some confusion, or maybe some confusion on my part, because I'm trying to see what kind of policy council would support. But lots of nice words, but I'm definitely confused. So, I still feel like we're debating the value of these. We have to be one of the only communities left even debating the value of mixed-use development. And during the presentation, we hear a lot of permitted. This is permitted and that's permitted, but it's not required. And that's why we're not seeing it. So sure, we can permit lots of mixed-use development, but if it's never applied for and we never require it, then we're never going to get it. And we're certainly not going to get much of it. And so I think we've seen that with a couple of applications even this term. So the strip mall at 80th and 204th that's going in, 2.5 acre strip mall with single story, commercial for the most part, a drive through along the sidewalk in the heart of a residential area that was approved just last year. Only 2 members of this council voted against that development. Two of us. So I think, for us, when are we going to start requiring it? I don't know if we have to do a full scale review. We'll stop getting strip malls when we start voting them down. And just not allowing them anymore. So for example, we did that with the attempt to do a drive-through single story building at 40th and 200th. That was a 5-4 vote. So again, we don't seem to have a lot of consensus on the value of requiring these developments in the heart of residential or commercial nodes. I don't understand how a drive-through is even being considered at a location like that. The next one is my attempts to amend the Williams neighborhood plan, even at the last meeting. The mover of the motion voted against my attempts to try to prevent single-story development there. So again, and there are a lot of concerns about altering the process that would actually require mixed-use development. So a lot of permitted, but I didn't hear a lot of required. And so if we're going to start headed down the path of requiring it, I'd like to see some commitments to actually follow through on that, not sort of vote for a strip mall one day and then all of a sudden we love mixed use the next. I think that's more important to me, is to see some consistency of positions, because I don't know how to navigate this process. If we approve strip malls one year and the next year we're conducting reviews to prevent strip malls. It's pretty easy to prevent strip malls, just start voting them down. So I don't know if there's a motion that can be more simplistic than a full-scale review like Councillor Whitmarsh was mentioning. I don't know if we need a full-scale review of every plan. Why not just have staff say that neighborhood plan amendments will be required or started on that no longer permit commercial developments without residential components in residential areas. Done. Like, it's not, so we would still potentially consider them at interchanges and business and industrial areas and other locations like that. But in residential areas, I don't understand why we need to do a full scale review. There's always this desire to do full scale reviews, have lots of meetings, talk about it for 2 years. Meanwhile, how many more strip malls will get approved in the meantime? So I think for me, I think we just simplify it down rather than full scale review of this and that. I'm not really following what that would be reviewing. Just simply be more clear direction that we don't want to see strip malls like have been approved at 80th and 204th any further. Thanks.
I don't see any further comments. So do we have a motion? Someone like to? Oh, okay. So we have Councillor Whitmarsh. Sorry, I took a bit.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, as I said, I don't think we need to have a full-scale review. I think maybe referring to staff to give us some further discussion on areas that could include mixed use. And, I'm open to having a discussion with council about maybe some of the areas that maybe we do want to require it as opposed to making it an option. It certainly isn't my thinking that every area should require mixed use. I think there are appropriate areas for it and then other areas that aren't maybe so appropriate for it. So I'd like to have sort of some guidance from staff on areas that could be used for mixed use, where it's an option, and areas where staff might recommend that we could consider requiring it, and maybe it does make sense in that case. So I'm open to having that kind of discussion, but to have a full review of the plan seems to be overkill for what we're trying to achieve today.
Okay, I don't see any more comments. What would be the next step?
Do staff?
Mr. Backen?
Maybe Mr. Backen could guide us.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We're looking for a motion, and I think there's two competing thoughts. I've heard, a general thought that I provided that doesn't seem to meet council's needs, which is actually helpful because it means that we can narrow it. And I think Councillor Woodward perhaps was moving towards a motion that effectively was that we could be requiring mixed-use development in commercial areas for those that are not yet developed. And he had more eloquent language than I did, but I think that may be where the first thought was, but it'll be to the chair to determine the order of people that may wish to provide motions.
Okay, so I see hands up for Councillor Woodward.
Yeah, so I think, it'd be good to get some more feedback here for trying to do a motion. I mean, it's not my goal to say that if you've got a commercial node somewhere that you have to put residential on it. I think Councillor Woodmarsh is in the right direction. In some areas, such as interchanges, Gloucester, and some other areas, they're perfectly reasonable, but they're not reasonable at 204th and 80th, and they're not reasonable at 200th and 40th. And so, that's what my goal is, that if you want to build commercial entities in these areas, that there should be some concern or some desire to see them developed as walkable neighborhoods, not strip malls inside residential areas. And I think that I don't know how to narrow that down to try to say, I'm quite comfortable to just say I'm not going to vote for those anymore. But if other people need to see the process changed, I'm not sure how to get to that. I still think we've got maybe a bigger problem than we're admitting when we get a staff recommendation to support a strip mall in 2021 and 2020. And I think that that's something I'd like to explore and repair. That, how is it that we get a recommendation to support 2.5 acres of single-story commercial with a drive-through at 204th and 80th? And how do we fix that and find the best way to fix that? Because that's the goal here, at least my goal. The goal is not to beat up on everybody that wants to do a single-story commercial at an interchange or an industrial area, but to find a way to make the process yield the better results. I'm more interested in what the outcome is than the process to get there. But if other people are more interested in the process than the outcome, well, then let's try to address the process. And I'm not quite sure how to do that. I'm a little bit concerned about putting motions forward at CPC meetings just to have them redebated and voted down at council meetings. We've been seeing that the CPC meeting, we come to an agreement at CPC, and then 2 weeks later, we're all voting it down. So maybe I'll just do a notice of motion at the council meeting rather than debate it here and then just have to redebate it again in a week and a half. Thanks.
Okay, so Councillor Richter.
Yeah, I think the point that Councillor Woodward has raised is a very valid one from the perspective of, well, this CPC structure isn't working very effectively. And most of the frustration that I'm feeling around CPC is the fact that we do reverse our decisions once it gets to the council table. So why do we even have this step? Maybe we should just eliminate it. I was thinking maybe we take it back to our next session with Dr. McIntosh about getting rid of CPC or doing something different with it. But we need a referral motion, and I think the suggestion that we refer this back to staff to identify areas where mixed use should be required, and to identify corresponding population increases and municipal costs. That would be my referral motion.
Okay, do we have a seconder? Councillor Arneson. Any questions? Okay. Could we have that repeated?
Do you want me to repeat it, or did staff get it?
I think staff is working on it.
While they're
Okay.
deciphering that, Madam Chair, and trying to read it back, I was wondering if perhaps we could have any sort of geographic focus, because that could include, it could be more broadly than was intended, and that could include developed areas. Maybe we want to focus on the undeveloped areas, Mr. Chu, no, just on the perhaps potentially the undeveloped areas would be helpful.
Okay, so do we have a geographical area that we'd like to focus on, Councillor Richter? Or members
Well,
of council?
I mean, again, I go to what Councillor Woodward said. Why are we putting strip malls in residential areas? We should be looking at the whole Willoughby plan. And I can't see that there's any area to specifically focus on other than the whole area. That was the intent of my motion, but if somebody else wants to narrow it down, they can certainly do so.
Mr. Backen?
Oh, that's helpful. We'll insert Willoughby, because that gives us a sense.
Okay. Councillor Whitmarsh?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I guess for me, I think it should be restricted to the undeveloped areas of the Willoughby neighborhood. Doesn't make sense to go into developed areas and try and change it. So I think but within the Willoughby neighborhood plans. I think there's two things being done in this motion. As I said, I am supportive of hearing from staff on areas that would suit where multi or mixed use could be an option, and then others where staff might recommend that we consider requiring it. I'm open to hearing that from staff, and I think that's helpful to have that information. But there are some other parts of this motion that I'm not so sure about, particularly trying to compare it to government, level of government. It seems like we're taking a narrow area of undeveloped area of Willoughby and then trying to match that to the entire overall cost of government in the township of Langley. That doesn't make sense to me. So I think we need to either divide the motions into separate motions, or I'm not going to be able to support it with three different things going on in the same motion.
Madam Chair, just the point we're at is I think we should read back the motion as we understand it, so if there's subsequent comments, such as division, then we could address those.
Okay, could we have that motion read back?
The motion currently reads to identify areas in the Willoughby plan where mixed use should be required and identify areas of population increase and comparative municipal costs.
Okay, thank you.
No, that doesn't actually capture the intent of what I was trying to get at. What I was trying to get at is that if we're amending the plan to require mixed use, what is the impact of that on population density in terms of the build out population and the corresponding increase in municipal costs as a result of increased density?
Okay, I see staff are busily writing, so maybe we'll have a reread on that.
Yeah, because basically when these things come to council from now on, they should be saying, this is the density for this area. If we approve this mixed use, it will increase the density by how much?
Okay, so Wendy's going to repeat it.
Councillor Richter, just so I understand, so you're talking the build-out population at the time in the future?
Okay. Yeah, what's the impact on the build-out population? Maybe that's the easiest way to phrase it. Because we start these neighborhood plans with a certain density, and then all these pieces come to council and they get approved by council. But at no point in time is council really aware of the full impact of the increased density. Like, and this goes back to the original comment that I made. How did we get from 68,000 to 100,000? Like, that's a huge population increase. Granted, it's what the developers want because that's what they want to build. But once they've built and left, that population still has to be serviced. And there's a cost to servicing that population, which we need to be aware of ahead of time and prepared to deal with.
If I may?
Yep.
So rewording it, we have that the Willoughby Neighborhood Plan Review be referred to staff to identify areas in Willoughby where mixed use should be required and to identify corresponding population increase and corresponding municipal costs.
Yeah, that kind of captures it better. Thank you.
Okay, so we have a couple more hands up here. Councillor Woodward?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to need that read back one more time, please. I'm not quite following it.
That the Willoughby Neighborhood Plan Review be referred to staff to identify areas in Willoughby where mixed use should be required and to identify corresponding population increase and corresponding municipal costs.
Okay, so I'd certainly appreciate that. I mean, I'm going to support the Willoughby, but I'm going to have because I don't want to restrict it to Willoughby. And I had, we've got infill development potentially occurring in Aldergrove. We've got potentially infill development in other parts of the township, Walnut Grove potentially down the road. So I appreciate the desire to limit it, not have a review of the entire township, but I had a follow-up motion maybe that will capture the strip mall component more better than this, but I'll certainly support this one. Thanks.
Hey, Councillor Ferguson?
Hello. So, yes, I'm glad that you were able to repeat the motion. It's too bad that we can't get it on the screen. I know that another councillor had said that some communities are able to type it and put it up on a screen. I don't think our technology level's there yet, but that would be helpful. There's a lot of discussion around, strip malls. I actually, don't call them strip malls. Especially the new ones that come into play. Applicants come before us. They follow a policy and an official community plan, neighborhood plan that asks for certain things to be done prior to it coming to council for the readings. So the reality is, and I said to Mr. Chu earlier on that, we started off with, 2 stories. And then we got the 3 stories and the construction with wood. Hey, we'll go to 5 and 6 stories construction with wood. And I think it's 12 stories now, construction with wood. Yeah, so now it's up to 12. Those things make a difference. So folks 10 years ago that were putting together a project and have to assemble the land and go through a process, they end up with an application in front of council, And those of us that are looking at 2020 and 21, numbers and 21, the future, say, well, why is that the way it is today? It's because it went through a process. So let's hope for the future. That's all we can do is plan for the future, what we're going to do, and not worry about, I guess, many of the things that exist in the past. Now, having said that, I think it's important to note that we've did a lot of discussion around mixed uses today and how we can improve them and how we can look at making Langley a better livable community, which is, I think, every member of council. Now, as far as CPC, I think we do actually have a valid point with the CPC meetings because it does give us a second sober thought when things do come to council in case other members of council have motions or amendments that may indeed improve the process going forward. And my last point is, as a former Mayor Bill said, Langley was a great place before the people came.
All right, thank you. Councillor Davis?
You got to watch how you say that, Steve. Okay, I just really simply put, I think I'm going to support this. But what about in pipeline? Because I know that, was it the 204th and 80th that Councillor Woodward mentioned? And I think that that was in line long before okay. How many applications are in line that if this goes from here today, next meeting, it gets passed, does this mean that we go back to the people that had a development application against staff for a year or 6 months? Does this mean that we have to go out and say, oh, you can't do that anymore, we just changed the rules? I know you've been abiding by the rules, but we've changed them now. So how does that work? Will this be from any new application forward about mixed use? And Councillor Woodward makes a good point about his term was infield development. Because if we restrict it to Willoughby, well, it's not always just happening in Willoughby. He mentioned another one that was in Brookswood. So it's like, I guess my question is to staff, through the chair, how many are, because that was one of the problems with the one in Willoughby. It wasn't really a problem, but that's maybe tended to make me vote the way I did, because they had worked it, they had it all figured out, and then all of a sudden, bang. So,
Mr. Rebecca?
Where does it start?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through to Councillor Davis. From memory, I cannot recall any specific applications. There was one mentioned as the Active Williams application. And with respect to the items that Mr. Chu outlined in terms of the neighborhood centers, I can't recall currently any other ones that are in our active application. In terms of the process, Councillor Davis, staff will advance the applications on the basis of the current council adopted policy. If council adopts a motion today, staff will work on that and bring it back. That policy wouldn't be amended until council decides to amend at that point in time. Having said that, staff knows that the majority of our applications here in a growing community are rezoning applications. And council does have the purview through those rezoning applications to consider the policy context within those applications and approve or deny those applications on an individual basis, as Councilor Woodward had alluded to.
So that's not really going to be a problem then, it sounds like. Okay.
Through the chair, in summary, that's correct, Councilor Davis.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Arneson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's been a helpful discussion today, I think, through the council process and everybody contributing different perspectives. It's getting to a place where we're able to refine the overall idea, which obviously, sometimes when a motion goes forward, it may be relevant in different ways to different people. So now what we're seeing today is the scope of what we're looking at. So personally today, I would prefer just to deal with what we have in front of us, and secondarily then, not with the timeline that this is going to take in any event and the other interests that we have ongoing. I personally think it's better just to focus on one particular area, because it seems to me revamping all of our plans, and I'm not saying I would be against that. I'd probably be very favorable to that, but I'm just talking about the timeline that we have. So further to the actual motion that's in front of us, I hope that some are not inclined to vote it down just because it's got a compounding factor to it, talking about population and the cost of governance, etc. To me, that's a very important issue, but not, excuse me, not one necessarily that I want to embed in this particular motion. I do think it's highly relevant, and I think we should be having that discussion. And I think we probably should have had it a long time ago. But in any event, I think I would prefer today, having the motion in front of us, to move forward with a limited review to try and understand what the parameters would be for where it would be appropriate to have mixed development in Willoughby. And consequently from that, I think it will be helpful as a learning exercise to know, maybe it is the case that we should just allow mixed-use development everywhere. But I don't know that, because I'm not a planner. I've not been involved in all of the negotiations and the prior understandings, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm not saying we can't take a sharp turn. However, I think that we need to do it prudently, and I think we need to focus our efforts so that we get something back in front of us that we can be agreeable to at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Whitmarsh?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question through to staff on this motion. The last part of the motion deals around the cost of this. I'm just wondering if maybe staff could help to give some understanding on how they're interpreting, calculating those costs, what that means for them. As it seems to me, is it the cost of the decision to make something mixed use? And so we calculate that, or are we talking the cost of overall government? And so I've heard a number of things, so it'd be helpful to know how staff is interpreting and how they would calculate the cost factor that's in this motion.
Mr. Backen?
Madam Chair, I think the reference to cost was the overall impact on government of the incremental number increase in residents. So as a hypothetical, if it costs $100 more in terms of each resident adding to the overall expense burden of the township, when we look at that, is that a net number, or is it a gross number, or is there a benefit? So for example, I think the question underlies if it was costing us $200 gross for a member, a resident to join because of all of the ancillary services, if we net that cost at 100, what's that going to be with these increased populations? And conversely, I suppose theoretically, if it was to actually provide a benefit, what would that look like? The traditional thought was that growth should pay for growth, but we've seen some instances where that hasn't been the case, and I think it's suggesting we get a handle on it. So in answer to the question, I think it's the broader question, not of the mixed use, but of the broader question in terms of the impact of growth or these incremental numbers, what that would look like to the overall township's financial, situation.
So, thank you. I guess that's why I'm much wondering if it's around the overall growth and cost of growth, then that seems to be quite a distinct and separate motion from attaching it to this motion around specifically dealing with Willoughby and mixed-use development. So it feels to me like it's a much bigger question of the cost of growth, which is a separate motion, separate discussion. It seems to me they should be divided.
Okay, Councillor Woodward?
I appreciate that. So yeah, I appreciate those comments from Mr. Becken as well. Trying to put it in context, a more broader motion. I'd like to just again give you a heads up, Madam Chair, that I'd like to do a more focused motion after this one, rather than trying to combine them together or amend. And I think we could maybe sort it out at the next council meeting, or if there's some overlap, maybe staff can figure that out if they're ultimately adopted by council at the next council meeting. So I'm going to support this because I think there might be some interesting debate and interesting information to come back around increasing population projections and some of that development paying for development that Mr. Backen mentioned. In terms of mixed-use developments, I mean, this isn't about allowing mixed-use developments everywhere. I don't know of anybody that's even suggested that somehow we're going to allow form-based building and as opposed to use-based. So I don't even know anybody who's even suggested that. So again, it's not about mixed-use development everywhere. It's about if you're not allowing strip malls in residential areas. It's pretty simple. No more strip malls, such as the one at 204th and 80th in the heart of a residential area approved just last year. So it's not about mixed-use development everywhere or requiring residential uses in interchanges or industrial areas on commercial development. This is about preventing strip malls in residential areas. So I have a motion coming specific to that, Madam Chair.
Okay, so should we call the question on the first motion? Okay, so all those in favor? Any opposed? And I don't see any opposed, so it's unanimous. Okay, so Councillor Woodward, would you like to make your motion?
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. So I just emailed that to the clerk, so I'll read it out, but the clerk has an emailed copy of it and can maybe read it back. That's council direct staff to report not enact or draft, to report on community and neighborhood plan amendments to no longer allow for commercial developments without residential components within residential areas. So move.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Arneson, seconds.
So I think we've had lots of discussion on the item, and if anybody has any questions or other comments, I can join the debate, but maybe the clerk can read that back for us one more time. Thanks.
Yeah.
The motion reads that council directs staff to report on community and neighborhood plan amendments to no longer allow for commercial development without residential components within residential areas.
Okay, so I have a question from Councillor Whitmarsh.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question to staff. This motion is the intention that, or maybe I also ask the mover, but is the intention that staff would come back with what the implications are, either positive or negative, about this, implementing this in the future?
Mr. Vacan?
It's a simple question, but a complex answer. I think the actual motion asks for the process and the consequences as opposed to a recommendation. If there was something egregious, I suppose we'd come in on the substance, but there's on the surface nothing egregious about the concept at all. So I don't think it'll be a substantive analysis of the pros and cons of the decision. I think that's what Council's directions provided after both the presentation and the previous referral. Instead, it'll focus on the process and as well the implications of that process.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Arneson?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And through you to staff, I'm just trying to clarify what the understanding would be in terms of the scope of this. So I'm thinking that this is prospective and it would apply to across the township of Langley, not just Willoughby, because it seems very prescriptive that way. Would that be a correct interpretation? So that would be Brookswood and Fernridge, that would apply to Aldergrove, obviously, and all other neighborhoods within the township. Is that correct?
That's correct. The motion, as we have it worded, is broader than simply the Willoughby neighborhood.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I don't see any other questions. Oh, all right. Councillor Ferguson. I didn't see your hand up.
Yes, here it is. Councillor Woodward sent us something. Did the clerk send us a copy of that so we could reread it? The actual motion, since he's sent us a copy of the motion.
I think staff already repeated it.
Yeah, okay, but I
Would
mean,
you like to would you like it
There's some people
repeated?
that maybe wanted some amendments to it. I was just going to amendment to a motion that we haven't seen. We've heard it.
So your Madam Chair will recirculate the email that was sent by Councillor Woodward. So you'll have that. And I think the where we record the process to be has been moved and seconded. We're now at the debate stage, and you'll have the motion. So now there can be any amendments or clarifications sought.
Okay. Did you have any amendments, Councillor Ferguson?
No, but can you repeat the motion again then, please? Well, maybe, Madam Chair, you can repeat the motion then for me.
I don't have it in front of me.
I can do that for you.
That's what I
sir.
thought.
That council directs staff to report on community and neighborhood plan amendments to no longer allow for commercial developments within residential components without residential components within residential areas. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Davis?
Don't want to add to the confusion, but to me, it's going to council to look at, and it's going to staff to look at, and it's going to come back with the pros and cons. Did I miss the first sentence in that? Maybe I did.
I believe it's to direct staff to report back. So
Okay, perfect. Yep. I'm going to support it if it's because what are we out if we, and I think at this point, we could pick it apart, but I think maybe might be better to get staff's opinion of it, and then we can pick it apart later and unpack it. There, I just got the motion now, so I going to vote on what I'm listening you say. So the heck with this thing. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Woodward?
Yeah, I just want to reiterate for, just for Councillor Davis, and we can always amend it at the next council meeting or anything else. This is only referral back to the next council meeting. So there'll be 2 weeks to think about it, read it in writing, and then debate it again at the next council meeting. Thanks.
Okay, I don't see any other hands up, so I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? And it carries unanimously. All right. Pardon me? Oh, shall we take a break? 10 minutes? 5 minutes? 10 minutes? Okay, so 10 to 11.
So, Madam Chair, we'll return at 10 to 11 and begin the second topic, which is going to be the Childcare Action Plan.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, so I will, the next item on the agenda is the Childcare Action Plan, which was referred from the July 27, 2020 regular council meeting. Councillor Richter, I believe you moved the motion to refer it. Did you wish to start the conversation?
Yes, I do actually, because there's been a lot that have changed on the federal and provincial fronts since the time when this report was put together. And the big change has been the agreement between the federal and provincial government to bring in $10 a day daycare. And it will be phased in over the next 5 years. But by, I believe it's next year or the year after, the daycare cost should be cut in half. So this report, as I recall, had some provisions in it with regards to township offering basically daycare opportunities and after the school care for $10 a day for $10 a day cost. I think that we may need to go back and relook at those sections in the report that focus on these particular programs, as there may not be a need anymore for us to be actually providing this. But if there is a need for us to actually provide it, then I think it's the onus is on the township to ensure that we're getting compensated for running these programs through the federal and provincial government agreement on daycare.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Richter. Councillor Arneson? Oh, do we have a presentation from staff?
Madam Chair, the presentation would only be if it was requested by council.
Okay.
The protocol is the council should be discussing it, and if there's any request of information from staff, the staff can then speak to it.
Okay. Councillor Arneson?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you again to Mr. Ward for putting this together and for coming today to answer any questions that we have. This is more by way of comment, and I agree with Councillor Richter in that there has been a lot that's really changed in the landscape, both between the provincial and the federal government in terms of funding. And I had focused when looking at this at the opportunities that we have as a growing community in the area and sphere of influence that we have that doesn't cost us anything, is to look at our zoning and our applications to make determinations about where we would like to see daycare operators be in our community to provide more affordable options, especially I don't think things have changed that much since the report was written, but statistically speaking, especially for areas that are underserviced, because there are areas that are pretty well served by daycare. But I also think it's really critical, and further to the earlier discussion we had about mixed use, what are the opportunities that we have to work with proponents to be able to get them to provide, maybe based on further density or other considerations, maybe an amenity for a daycare, and also just the potential. I know we work with the school district for some programming so that we're allowed the use of that, but to even expand that model more, because I think that co-location is really a very advantageous thing to consider, because people taking their kids to school often have a range of childhood care needs. And so toddlers, you don't want to have to go across the community to take your toddler to drop them off and then also have school-age children. It would be far more preferable and efficient should you have them on the same site. So this is my long-winded way of saying I'm very supportive of this plan. It's going to cost the township nothing. If there is a question I have, it's do we still have money in the budget? It was indicated that at one time there was money in the budget for this. So maybe through Madam Chair to somebody on staff, this modest amount is still available, is my question.
Mr. Ward is walking up.
Yes, thank you for the question. Yes, there is still funding available for the costs, budget requirements that were indicated in the cover report.
Okay, thank you. So I think it was Councillor Ferguson and then Councillor Whitmarsh.
Thank you. I'm not sure if I mean, I would be more than pleased to hear a presentation by Mr. Ward and his team if they want to do it. I think it's an excellent presentation. I was just looking at, I've got all sorts of notes. There's even a familiar face, Mr. Gabriel, Bob Gabriel, that is on page 17 if you look at your report. And of course, you caught him talking. I don't think he ever stops talking, but he's a great guy. He has a good influence on the community, has a lot of good ideas. As a teacher myself, although I taught older students, I think that this is an excellent opportunity to look and review how we move forward with childcare and providing the opportunities for folks in the development business and landowner business to be able to facilitate these type of things. They're not easily done. Sometimes they cause some concerns, as experience in the past in the TOL. Putting these type of things with parking and other things in neighborhoods, but that doesn't change the importance of it. And I think it's important. I would like to see a presentation if Mr. Ward's got one. So that's my point, Madam Chair.
Great. Councillor Whitmarsh?
Thank you. Yeah, I guess I would say the same as Councillor Ferguson. It's been 18 months since we first got this Childcare Action Plan report for the Mayor and Council. There has been a number of situations have changed provincially and federally, as some of the other councillors have mentioned. So I think it'd be helpful to hear from staff just what are some of those changes and how does that impact the report as we have it today. 18 months later, where are we sitting today as a way by update, I think would be helpful.
Okay, and I would concur, and one of my questions would be, how does a municipality best support the federal and provincial $10 a day daycare? So I would say that it would be unanimous that we would like to have that proposal. I don't see anybody opposed.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chair. Assisting me with the presentation today is Ms. Robinson from our Sustainability Department. She will deliver the first part of the presentation, and then I will deliver the second. Thank you.
All right. Welcome, Ms. Robinson.
Thank you. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of Council. As noted, Mr. Ward and I are here today to present on the Childcare Action Plan, which was received by Council on July 27th, 2020, and referred to CPC. Okay, so just a bit of background on how we arrived here today. I'm going to provide a bit of background on how we arrived here today, and then what the research and data tells us about why childcare matters for children, families, communities, and the local economy. Next, we will describe the process to prepare the Childcare Action Plan, and then we will summarize the key elements of the proposed plan, including what we heard during the public and stakeholder engagement, roles and responsibilities for the many players involved in childcare delivery, and an overview of the priorities and key actions. Okay, so this project commenced 3 years ago in September of 2018 when Council directed staff to apply for funding to develop a childcare action plan for the township. A few months later, in December, Council endorsed staff to apply for UBCM grant funding to prepare the plan. The grant application was successful, and the project commenced in April of 2019. The project included background research, a needs assessment, public and stakeholder engagement, and the development of the plan itself, all which took a bit over a year to complete. Then in July of 2020, Council received the Childcare Action Plan and referred it to CBC, and here we are today. So next, I will outline what the research and data analysis reveals about why accessible and affordable childcare is important for communities. So research undertaken for this project shows that there are economic, environmental, and social impacts when accessible and affordable childcare is lacking in communities. So first, we'll talk about the economy. When childcare is available and accessible, labor force participation, especially among women, is increased. So for example, when a universal childcare system was established in Quebec in 1997, labor force participation by women with a child under the age of 3 increased by 20%. Not only does accessible childcare increase household incomes and participation in the economy, but childcare is about gender equality, providing more opportunities for women with young children who want or need to work. Through our engagement work, business owners indicated that the lack of accessible childcare was problematic for their own workers, and it impacts their ability to recruit and retain employees. Now, the environment. When quality childcare space is not available in one's community, parents are required to drive each way to these childcare locations, which equals an increase in greenhouse gas emissions and impacts on climate change, which conflicts with the goals of the township's climate action strategy. And finally, social. Childcare is important for positive early childhood development. The quality of children's early experiences can have a lasting impact on their lifelong social and physical health. Additionally, childcare can provide more space for parents to complete other tasks or take time for themselves, which has mental health benefits. So if those categories on the last slide sound familiar, that's because the benefits of quality, accessible, and affordable childcare are part of a sustainable community and aligns directly with the township's sustainability charter. Action on childcare also aligns with policies in the township's official community plan that aim to encourage and facilitate the development of childcare spaces in the community. So to prepare the action plan, UBCM awarded the Township of Langley $25,000 in grant funding for the project. With assistance from a consultant, the planning process involved best practice research, data collection and analysis, and a review of existing policies and regulations. A key element of the project included community engagement with parents and guardians, childcare providers, and other stakeholders to better understand the needs of our community members. So as we looked into the data, some interesting information emerged. First, I'm sure this is no secret, but the township is a very family-centered community. Reports from Statistics Canada show that nearly half, or 49%, of all households in Langley Township have children aged 12 and under, which is considered to be the age range where children are likely to need some form of childcare. However, the statistics show that only 1 in 5 children have a licensed childcare space available to them. Or in other words, there are 19.8 spaces for every 100 children across Langley Township. And if we dig a little deeper into the data and look at childcare spaces by community, we can see that Aldergrove, Brookswood, Fernridge, and the rural area have the fewest childcare spaces per 100 children. And as is often the case, data is nuanced. So if we look at Walnut Grove and Willoughby, which is indicated by the yellow arrows there, though they don't appear as underserved on a percentage basis as some of the other communities that I just noted, because of the sheer number of children living there, the greatest need actually exists in these communities. So for example, in Willoughby, there are over 5,000 children without a childcare space available in the community where they live. And in this table, if we take a look at Fort Langley, we can see they seem to fare really well. They fare the best, actually, with 34.7 spaces per 100 children. But again, if we look at the data a little differently, and this time by age group, we can see that Fort Langley is very well served for ages 3 to 5, but there are actually 0 spaces for children under 3 years of age, which means that the parents of these 107 children will need to leave their community if they wish to access childcare for this age group. So really what this data analysis and brief overview shows is that there are childcare needs throughout the township and that these needs differ by community and by age group. So now I'll pass it over to Mr. Ward, who will walk us through the engagement process and the details of the Childcare Action Plan.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great. So the Community Engagement Program gave parents and guardians, childcare providers, and other stakeholders an opportunity to share their thoughts on childcare in Langley. Over 1,300 people engaged in 18 different engagement activities, including an online survey for parents and caregivers and an online survey for childcare operators. 3 major themes emerged from this community engagement. First is that more childcare spaces are needed to address current demand and our growing population. Space needs are particularly critical for school-aged children, aged 6 to 12, and care for children under the age of 3. Affordability is another barrier for many families. Our survey found that some parents and guardians are spending over $1,000 a month per child. A more recent survey of childcare fees in Langley conducted over the summer found that fees for some age groups are currently averaging $1,400 per month. We also heard that there's a lack of flexible and supportive care options. There are very limited licensed care options for families that need care outside of typical business hours. Care options for children needing extra support are limited and are more expensive. Childcare providers face challenges in finding qualified staff for children needing extra support. There are a number of organizations involved in childcare, and the proposed action plan indicates that childcare involves all levels of government, as well as the private and nonprofit sectors. Though federal and provincial governments are responsible for childcare funding, municipalities like the Township can play a key role in facilitating access to affordable and accessible care. Other organizations involved in childcare include Fraser Health, the Langley School District, the Langley Childcare Resource and Referral Program, as well as for-profit and nonprofit childcare providers. The action plan states that the primary roles of the Township are to identify appropriate locations for childcare through its land use planning and regulations, ensure that health and safety standards for childcare buildings are met through its building permitting and licensing regulations, to compile and share information that identifies local childcare needs. As demonstrated on some of the previous slides, childcare space data varies from community to community and age group to age group. Tracking this local data and making it available is an important role that the Township can play to facilitate childcare delivery planning and give local operators a better opportunity to access provincial funding opportunities. Other roles include convening stakeholders to enhance coordination and collaborative action in the community, and to engage other levels of government to influence policies and decisions. To support space creation and address related challenges, the Child Care Action Plan proposes 5 five-year priorities, along with 21 actions. And at this point, I'll just take a pause to reflect on the committee's earlier discussion around some of the changes that have been announced. I just want to say that when we prepared this plan, the universal system had already been announced by the provincial government. So that was effectively a known quantity going into this work. We don't know exactly what that system is going to look like, but we do know that the province at the time of creating this plan had intended to move towards a $10 a day universal childcare system. It's my understanding that the federal announcement has simply accelerated that timeline, but not substantially changed the context. So our first priority is to increase the number of licensed childcare spaces. The 8 actions under this priority focus on reviewing our land use policies and regulations, identifying space that exists throughout the community that could be developed and transformed into childcare, and exploring potential opportunities for the Township to further support childcare delivery in the future. An action under this priority also provides direction to explore provincial funding opportunities to develop childcare spaces. The most recent provincial capital grant program for childcare provided local governments with up to $3 million in capital funding to create new spaces, with no requirement for local governments to match funding. And for clarity, this provincial funding did not require local governments to operate the childcare, as those spaces could be leased to third-party nonprofit operators. The second priority is to improve childcare affordability. Recognizing the Township's very limited role in this particular area, the 2 actions under this priority focus on advocating the province for more affordable childcare and helping to raise awareness of existing provincial fee reduction programs for families. The third priority is to strengthen partnerships and collaboration. The 5 actions under this priority focus on enhancing communication and collaboration on childcare with local stakeholders, including the Langley Children Committee, the Langley School District, and childcare providers. The fourth priority is to address staffing challenges. As part of our community engagement with local childcare operators, we heard that recruiting and retaining qualified staff is a significant barrier to creating new childcare spaces and even maintaining the spaces we have today. Recognizing the Township's limited role in this area, the 3 actions under this priority focus on convening local stakeholders to co-develop solutions for staffing challenges and helping to raise awareness of current provincial initiatives related to staff recruitment and retention. The fifth priority is to enhance before and after school recreation programming. The three actions under this priority focus on seeking opportunities to scale up existing recreation programs that promote physical activity and healthy living. Although recreation programs like the Township's Active Beyond the Bell program are not licensed childcare, they do help to fill the gap for many families for out-of-school care. It is noted that on April 26, 2021, Council directed that the Active Beyond the Bell program transition to a full cost recovery program. In terms of implementation, the action plan places a strong emphasis on partnerships and undertaking the recommended actions in collaboration with other organizations. The actions are intended to be implemented over a 5-year timeframe and have been categorized as short-term and medium-term actions. It is recommended that the action plan be updated in 5 years' time. The direct costs related to implementation are estimated to be less than $10,000 and can be accommodated within existing township operating budgets, as mentioned earlier. Exploratory actions that may result in future costs would need to be considered by Council as part of future budget deliberations. And that concludes our presentation. Thank you.
Great, thank you. We have a couple questions. Mayor Froese?
Thank you for the presentation. I had a couple questions. You mentioned there's 1 in 5 space currently available in the township. Now, is that one space of childcare for every 5 children that are in the township, or are these identified needs that there's 4 kids that aren't getting? I mean, what I'm trying to say is if they're at home and mom's at home and they don't need childcare space, are they being counted in the 1 in 5, or is this actual need that there's 4?
It's the former. So it doesn't suggest that there are 4 children that are absolutely underserved. It's just a data point to sort of consider the amount of amount of childcare spaces that are available in the Township of Langley compared to other jurisdictions, for example. So just for Council's information, the national average is 27 childcare spaces for every 100 children.
Okay.
So we're a bit lower than the national average.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. The other thing is I guess you call it, I don't know. You have licensed and unlicensed. It's the family members looking after, grandma looking after the child and doing that, or neighbors looking after neighbors' kids, and quite happy to do that. Is that captured in here at all as a childcare space, or is that? And if it is, do you know approximately how many of those would be, or is there any way of capturing that?
That would be very difficult to capture because the information we get is from Fraser Health and through their licensing data. So this childcare action plan is focused on licensed childcare. We're certainly, and I don't hope that this wasn't portrayed in this way, we're certainly not suggesting that we need 1 licensed space for every child in the Township of Langley. We certainly recognize that many families and parents will make other decisions on how best to care for their children.
Okay, no, that's great. Thanks. Just wanted that clarity. I appreciate it. I do like the report, and be happy to move it once everyone's had a chance. Thanks.
Councillor Whitmarsh.
Thanks for the presentation. I had some of the same questions that Mayor Froese had as well. And I guess to add another question to that, we're talking here about creating over time 10,000 additional spaces. Do we have any idea of how well that will fulfill the need? Since our stats are based on every child that lives in the township, regardless if they're needing care or not, how do we know that 10,000 is the right number?
Yeah, it's been a challenging question for even staff to consider as we've developed this, because there hasn't actually been any provincial guidance on what the target number of spaces ought to be in a community, particularly in light of the provincial government's vision to move towards a universal childcare system. So in saying that, staff undertook some background research, and we identified a target of 70 spaces per 100 children for the 0 to 6 age group and 55 spaces for 100 children for the 6 to 12 age group. Now, those targets are based on some of the more ambitious targets that we've seen used, but we've also drawn on other jurisdictions that have universal systems. So Quebec, for instance, we see utilization rates of 80 spaces for 100 children sort of overall. And in places, in Europe where they have very long histories of universal childcare systems, we see utilization rates of 95% children using childcare spaces. So yes, these are certainly ambitious targets. The action plan does state that the township is by no means taking responsibility for meeting those targets, but based on the provincial vision and now federal vision to move towards universal childcare, we don't think that those targets are unusual. Another data point to consider is that kindergarten in the province of BC is optional. 95% of children use kindergarten.
Right, okay, so do these numbers then also account for the fact that we're growing at, you know, whatever it is per year, 2 or 3% a year, 4,000 or 5,000 people moving to Langley? These numbers are, to the 70 number out of 100 that you talk about, is that accounting for the fact that in 5 years we're gonna have another 20,000 people living here?
Yes, they do.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Ferguson?
Yes, thank you. Good points made by Councillor, particular points the mayor made regarding, you know, what is the result of grandparents, friends, family, neighbors, and other folks. And some, they may be, in the sense of neighbors or other family, they may be compensated, but you wouldn't know if that would be the case, right? Whether they're compensated or not. I think it's important that we and many councils have to stick handle through this with the new rules, regulations, working with. I think it's important to note that being partners and involvement. I mean, obviously, location is, and it's so important to note that. I mean, there's no sense having something, you know, at, you know, the 0 Avenue in 272nd, where you know you have a daycare there, where obviously you know it's not close to your business. Is another thing. So, as we move forward in land use and rezoning, I have a real quick question. An existing application or existing commercial or otherwise resident, for that to be rezoned or change zoning, would that have to come through bylaw through the first and second, or can that be done in-house, if I may? That's the first question.
Through the chair, apologies. The question is, would a rezoning for a childcare facility
No,
require?
it's not, the word wouldn't be an existing land use, say up in Willoughby or I'd say Brookswood, Aldergrove, an existing land use. Would they have to go through rezoning to have a childcare facility?
There are some provisions under provincial legislation that are incorporated into the township zoning bylaw that allow a licensed childcare facility for up to 8 children in a single family home. Other than that, it would need to have a zoning that specifically allows a group children's daycare under the township zoning bylaw.
Now, following along that, I don't want to put the, you know, you don't have to be able to answer every question. I mean, there could be parking, health, municipal health, pardon me, Fraser Health. There'll be other type of standards, but I just wondered, is there a lot they can done prior to going through? Because rezonings are always difficult. Is that process available?
So what the Childcare Action Plan is proposing a couple things in this area. One is to create a bit of a policy on where childcare spaces might be best suited. It would be almost analogous to some of our policies around assembly uses, for example. So identifying those areas that might be suitable for childcare. A second component of that, and it's identified in the Childcare Action Plan as well, is to take a look at our zoning bylaw, to look to see if there are any unintended barriers to childcare provision. Are there locations where childcare might be, you know, might make sense from a land use perspective that's not currently contemplated. And that would lead us to sort of further considerations of potential zoning bylaw amendments that would make it easier for folks to, for childcare operators to develop new childcare spaces.
So as we move forward, you just said assembly uses. I mean, would there, and they probably already exist anyway. And I know what the church up the street from us, they have a childcare and preschool. There's different ways of defining whatever it would be, and also age groups. Would that be the opportunities might arise even more so for churches and to a lesser degree community centers and to a lesser degree other type of institutional uses being able to come into the fold, if I may?
That would certainly be something that we would look at. Childcare is, in many cases, a permitted use already on those assembly use properties, depending on which zoning they have, of course.
Yeah, okay.
But some of the other thoughts, were, around even strata complexes of their amenity buildings. Are there opportunities there? These are some of the questions that have been posed, and we would hope to answer through the implementation of the Childcare Action Plan.
Okay, my very, very last question. Beyond the Bell program through the school district, how is that going now?
So the Active Beyond the Bail program relaunched this fall. They are at 11 locations across the township. And from the statistics that I just got from our recreation group, the majority of those sites are already at or near capacity or are already on a wait list.
Okay, thank you.
I just had a couple questions. The $10 a day, that was a pilot project, wasn't it, at some point?
So the provincial, yes, thank you for the question. So the provincial government is currently piloting $10 a day childcare sites throughout the province.
Right.
But it is part of, at least my understanding, a grander, broader vision of the provincial government to roll out $10 a day childcare across the province for every family that would like to have access.
So, okay, so that was my next question. I think you said under priority 2 that part of that would be bringing awareness to the community about fee reduction programs. Would that be like the subsidies that families get from the federal and the provincial governments? So if say we have 10 operators that are then going to go $10 a day daycare, those other operators will still be able to, families will still be able to take advantage of the subsidy? Or if you don't get into the $10 a day daycare, you're kind of hooped? Do you know? I guess that's probably unknown at this point.
Yes, thank you for the question. I would have to say that's a bit of an unknown at this point. There is still quite a bit of ambiguity on how this $10 a day, this universal system will be rolled out. We think that the vision is clear. We understand where the province is going. They would like every child and family to have access to a childcare space at a cost that they can afford. That's their vision. Exactly how they get there remains, I think, a little bit ambiguous to us. Hence, a 5-year action plan and not a 10 or a 20-year action plan.
Right.
We would, think that we find it's important that this action plan be particularly nimble, just in light of all of the changes and transitions that are happening at a senior government level in this area.
And I guess for me, I'd like to see that the families that need it most get first priority, not just maybe it's in a certain area, but I guess I don't know how that would get rolled out, but that would be one of my, just a comment. I see that Councillor Richter has her hand up. Councillor Richter.
Yes, thank you. I guess the two questions that I have is, this plan was put together. It may have contemplated the provincial system at the time, but the provincial system will be moving forward now because of the federal funding that's coming into play. So it almost seems to me like we need to refer back to staff to get a better sense of how the pieces are going to be put into place. One of the things, like the report stresses the need to work collaboratively with different organizations. Is that going to mean that we're going to be the spearhead for making that collaborative action occur? Or is that something that's going to be given to the health districts or to the school districts? And the other piece that I think is really important for us is how do we encourage more private delivery of childcare? And is that something that we can do?
Yes, thank you for the question. On the first, I believe, Councillor Richter, you're referring to priority 3 and the opportunity to strengthen partnerships and collaboration. So many of those actions are building on existing initiatives. So to continue to participate on the Langley Children Committee, for example, to continue that involvement and engagement. That's not something that the Township of Langley spearheads. We are a participant on that. To continue to participate in the Langley Healthier Community Partnership. That is an existing joint initiative of the Township of Langley and other organizations. And then looking at opportunities to strengthen collaboration with the school district, for instance, there are existing liaison meetings both at a council board level as well as at a staff-to-staff level that could be utilized just to put childcare on the agenda so that it can be monitored as something moving forward. And then I believe on the second question, really it's many those actions under priority 1 that really speak to increasing the number of licensed childcare spaces. And though the actions under that section don't speak to public, private, or nonprofit necessarily, they speak to looking at things like our zoning regulations, developing guidelines to make it easier for private operators to come forward and build and develop new spaces in the Township of Langley. Looking at existing facilities and buildings within the township that could be potentially converted and transformed, and whether there are any unintended barriers within our zoning bylaw to that. So there is admittedly absolutely an action within priority 1 to explore the feasibility of the township potentially delivering that in the future. It's meant to just simply be an exploratory feasibility assessment, given the fact that everything is so in flux within childcare right now. But I would say that the majority of the actions under priority 1 are really focused on private, for-profit or nonprofit operators.
Okay, my concern at this stage is I want to make sure that we get in the township fair and equal access to the provincial funding dollars, because the Fed dollars are going to flow through the province. So how do we position ourselves to ensure that some of those monies are going to end up, and a fair amount of those monies are going to end up financing childcare in Langley Township? It would seem to me that that's a key piece for us to be looking at right now. So rather than just accept the report, maybe we need to add a little bit to the report about the next steps, given the changing field out there, or the changing situation with $10 a day childcare.
Madam Chair, thank you. Appreciating the question. Just pointing out as well, it might be helpful that Action 2A under the draft Childcare Action Plan is to advocate to the Ministry of Children and Family Development to establish $10 a day prototype sites in the Township of Langley. So there is an existing advocacy action being proposed. Certainly an opportunity to bolster that, given that there have been some advancements even in the past 18 months. But I think some of these discussions around the Township's advocacy efforts could be certainly considered within that existing action moving forward.
Yeah, it seems to me that we need to be sure that we're well positioned to ensure that that happens. I think having a member, an MLA with ruling government right now would be a key piece for us to be liaisoning with on a regular basis around this topic, to make sure that a fair share of the monies will come to us. So I'm just wondering, I know Mayor Froese suggested that we move the report, but I think it's move the report and refer back to staff for an updated status, given the changes. Thank you.
Is that a referral or? Okay, so Mayor Froese.
Thank you. Yeah, Councilor Richter, listening to you, I totally agree. I think the first step is to endorse this. It really does set a path, and it gives staff the direction to work towards this and liaise and advocate for funding and the rest of it, to make sure that Township of Langley residents get their fair share. So I would like to move that the committee recommend to council to endorse the Child Care Action Plan and that staff report back within a year. Now, probably would be after the election next year, to report back on the progress made and any recommendations. But I would say just report back. I don't want to get too involved. So the motion would be to endorse the report and have staff report back within a year.
Okay, do you have a seconder?
I'll second.
Okay, Councillor Whitmarsh. And any further questions? I don't see any. So I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? And it's unanimous. Thank you for the presentation. Okay, so we move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the council procedure bylaw. The last item, okay. So Councillor Richter, I believe we were continuing with your notes included in the agenda package. So I guess we'll continue that discussion on the council procedure bylaw.
Okay, well, Madam Chair, I'd like to raise a question for consideration of the group, given that we're in the last year of this term. And should we just shelve this for the next council to deal with?
Mayor Froese.
Yeah, funny, Councilor Richter, I was thinking the same thing this morning. There's a lot of items in here that you've raised that are, some of them are, I don't know, I hate the word housekeeping, but it's, cleaning up the language. I see a lot of that in there. And some is more substantive. So certainly the more substantive stuff, I agree. Maybe it would be, as the new council reviews the council procedure bylaw under their lens, and they may have other ideas that might be good. But I'm happy to take your suggestion, but also there's some things that perhaps the clerk would just go through and there's some wording that's suggested. It really doesn't change the intent. I think it's just some wording, but just my thoughts. I think that's a good suggestion overall. Thanks.
Councillor Davis?
Does this mean if we were to table this, well, two issues. One issue is we're not getting it done. We've sent the last childcare thing back to staff. And the third thing is if we send this to the next council, terminate the meeting, does Mr. Packham not have to buy us lunch?
Mr. Vacan?
I can definitively say that lunch has actually already been ordered. So if there are people that need to depart, Councillor Davis can take over their lunches as well.
Okay, so I actually think that maybe I have two issues. Like I say, no, I was teasing about this two issues, but there's a big. We realized we need to get these CPP things done, and are we just punting this down the field and we're not tackling it? I'm just concerned about that. Thanks.
Councillor Whitmarsh?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I think when I went through the various amendments that were suggested on the document from Councillor Richter, I felt the same as maybe Mayor Froese. There was a number of items on there that were more housekeeping, language changes, maybe clarifications. And maybe it'd be helpful for staff as maybe, and that's maybe another day, but to identify those ones, and we could probably make decisions on those fairly quickly if they're just sort of language type things and housekeeping things. Those that are more substantive, I do think they require a fairly full conversation, and maybe does make sense to move that to the next council. I'm not sure that it just is delaying it. I think that, we're 10 months away from a new council, and so maybe those decisions on substantive items might be best left for that. But I do think the housekeeping ones could be dealt with, and if we're not prepared to do that today, which we likely are not, we could do that at a following meeting. I do feel that the other items we met, though, in terms of CPC, I think we did well today. We didn't just send the child care action plan to staff. We're now moving forward on it. We're just getting a report from staff in a year from now to see how we're doing. So I think we've done well on knocking two items off, so I don't think we should feel bad about the meeting today. I think it's been successful. Thanks.
Councillor Davis, your hand is up.
Oh, no.
Okay. Okay, all right, Councillor Ferguson.
Yeah, if there's, if I may, if there's some points that we should look at today, I don't want to see is there something that we might have missed as far as procedural bylaw. Waiting, I think we still have the people's business to do, and if there's anything important that any member of council might want to bring up. I myself don't have anything direct that I wanted, but I'd be more than willing to discuss anything going forward, even before the next election. I think there's some good points, and yes, we did, as mentioned by other members of council, we did. I particularly liked the discussions on both the Willoughby community plan and how that relates to both Langley and other communities and how we move forward, and always aware of that, and also a childcare action plan, and including the report, a commenting report. So I think we've done well today. Thank you.
Okay, so, Councillor Arneson. And Councillor Davis, your hand is still up, but I'm just not sure if you
He's
changed
very
your mind.
handy.
I'm sorry, I lower hand.
Lower, okay, Councillor Arneson.
Thank you, and thank you, Madam Chair, and through you to the rest of council. I agree with this concept that, and thank you very much to Councillor Richter for making a recommendation, or, well, not so much, but a suggestion that we consider looking at this, not necessarily all today, but to try and make an assessment about whether or not this should go forward to another council. I sort of prefer the hybrid option that was mentioned, I think, by Councillor Woodward and, Councillor Whitmarsh and others, that potentially, if we took these as propositions, I personally think that a vetting process through our legislative services would be very helpful. So if we were to defer this, for example, to the next meeting and create categories of propositions. So some of them, if it's just a very simple kind of language issue, that might be something that we could be aided by, as opposed to going methodically through all of them together. I'm not sure I'm seeing a visual over here that might not be conducive to that comment. But anyways, okay, well, now we're going to hear definitively what might be an issue with that.
I would be uncomfortable in selecting those that Councillor Richter felt were more important or somehow different. I would be happier if that were a council decision. If you want, we can quickly go through them. If they're just wordsmithing ones, we could move through them quickly. And we could probably be done before the lunch arrives. I don't think that would be a problem.
I guess my follow-up comment to that is just the manner in which they're presented here. And to me, it would be more helpful to see those potential changes in a context that also indicates what the rest of the language around the council procedure bylaw says, because it's a bit of a stretch to me to think about, changing words or phrases in the absence of what it, currently says. And I think that we should look at it in a contextual way, because I'm not sure about some of the propositions there, and if they wouldn't necessarily or unintendedly make a consequence that we didn't anticipate if you didn't look at the entirety of the rest of the council procedure bylaw. So I'm thinking that if we are going to delay in some way, I think it would be helpful to have them together so that we could make comparisons and review it in a more holistic way. Thank you.
Councillor Richter, did you want to make a recommendation or move deferral or make a suggestion somehow?
Well, I'm thinking that what we could do is what the clerk, the township clerk, Ms. Bauer, recommended, and that is maybe just go through these and tick off now what's housekeeping, deal with it, and leave the substantive ones. Because the procedure bylaw is really what governs how council conducts its business. I think we made some substantive changes to that. The way we're governing our business right now, it seems to be working fine for this council. Not sure that it would work for another council, but then that's up to the other council to decide how they want to proceed. So I'm fine if we just run through these and identify which are housekeeping and which aren't. We've got in B3, what I sent, pages 1 through 7. Pages 1 through 7. So we can just see which ones of these have we've already dealt with. So if we start with definitions, did we clear all those definitions up? Maybe Ms. Bauer can address that.
Is the mic on for me? Good, thank you. We actually got as far as section 9.10.
So we're up on 9 already. Yeah. Okay.
So in
Well,
9.10, you suggested that this needs to be supported by the majority of council. It's actually the practice that we do now that division is voted on. So that would basically be housekeeping, I believe.
okay, 9, I'm just flipping through to 9.10. Okay. Oh, wait, I know what I'm doing wrong here. I'm looking at the wrong page. Okay, dividing a motion. So at the end, add this needs to be supported by a majority vote of council.
Division is actually a motion that requires a vote by council anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that would kind of be housekeeping because that is the way it is managed.
Okay, well, I'll move that we add that in then. It's housekeeping. Add at the end.
Okay, that can definitely be done.
Do we need to have a seconder and a vote on that? Or should we just run through all of them and just keep a running list?
I think, yeah.
Okay, so what would be the suggestion from Ms. Bauer?
It's going to have to come back to council as a bylaw anyway.
Okay.
So if I can just keep a running list of approximately what council wants, and then when I bring the bylaw forward, I'll just compilate everything.
Okay, so we'll just kind of go through it and then okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. 9.11, I believe your comment was the chair will ensure that all members wishing and eligible to speak per section 9.08 have spoken before calling the vote.
Yeah, that's a housekeeping thing, isn't it?
Well, it could be added, but in normal times we have the speaker's pad and we tend to have everyone speak it first.
Yeah, but what we've been running into a little bit is some members of council wanting to go back and rediscuss something when we've already taken the vote.
That wouldn't apply to this. I believe that applies a little bit further down.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we will get to that one. Yes, you're right. And I do agree with that. But I believe you addressed it in 9.15. So we will get down there.
Okay. So in 9.11, adding the statement, the chair will ensure that all members wishing and eligible to speak per section 9.08 have spoken before calling the vote. That's not housekeeping, or that is housekeeping?
I wouldn't recommend adding it as it doesn't add value to it. If you would like it added, we could, but it is the practice anyway. And we do have, generally we have a speaker's pad, we have the Zoom hands. The chair is able to see who has spoken and who hasn't.
Okay, so we won't do 9.11 then. 9.12, unparliamentary language. Is that a housekeeping one?
Well, I don't know that we need the definition. It's kind of, I looked it up, and basically it seems to be just best described as profanity, insinuations, or insults, and I would hope that we wouldn't have to actually put that in the bylaw. Further, it is actually at the definition of, or at the ruling of the chair, so it is up to the chair to decide that, and I believe the chair can decide what is inappropriate at the time.
Okay, and the word unparliamentary, that needs to be corrected in the bylaw.
It does definitely. I will definitely fix that. That's a minor thing that we can fix. It was one of those helpful spell check issues.
Okay, so that's just check the,
we will
change
fix
the
that.
wording. Okay.
Okay.
9:15.
So 9:15 goes to people going back and discussing things after it's already been concluded.
Yeah.
Your comment was, what constitutes criticism? Do we need to define or eliminate? And council members are allowed to have individual opinions. And that's definitely true. Council definitely can have individual opinions. But I think what the point of the bylaw is speaking to, not going back to the things we've already discussed.
Yeah,
So,
and there has been situations on this council where the mayor has called for the vote, the vote's carried, and then another member of council decides they didn't like the vote.
Right, and that actually goes back to the unparliamentary.
Yeah.
And it would be to the chair that we have the ability to do that. It's just, it is the ruling of the chair that needs to be done then.
Okay, so does anything need to be added to 9:15 then?
I don't believe so.
No?
No.
It's good the way it is? Like maybe I should ask the mayor this. because he's the one who has to deal with it when it happens. Is there something we could add in to make it clear that when the vote's been called, the vote's been called? You don't get to ask to have it re-voted?
Yes, yeah, it's one of those, any member of council can certainly question the chair, and that's like a safety valve, I think. When someone says, I voted wrong, certainly, I think it's just courtesy. We say, okay, we record the vote. We're not going back into debate. If, let's say, Councillor Ferguson thought he was voting in favor and he was actually wanted to vote against it, well, then there's a whole reconsideration process, and sometimes it's just a short circuit. Just say, okay, recorded the vote the way he thought he voted, but it happens right after the vote is taken. It's not coming back the next meeting and saying, oh, I voted differently. But again, it's up to the council, I think, at that time. Maybe the clerk can help me out with that. But the chair does have that discretion. But it is kind of a short circuit. So we could go through the whole reconsideration, and then it comes back on the floor, and then it gets voted on, and then you record your vote. But I don't know if council really wants to go through that.
I think this is also speaks to it being a wider issue. So it's not that we can't go back and reconsider. It's people making comments about votes that have already happened.
Yeah, no comments. Just, I mean,
That's right.
I totally understand. Once the vote is over, we move on to the next item. If somebody says, oh, I made a mistake, I think it's reasonable for the clerk to recognize that.
Yeah. Okay, but so you're saying if it's a matter of they made a mistake in how they voted and they wanted to re-vote, we don't have to reconsider. We'll just do a second vote then?
Unless it was substantial and council wanted to do it. But I think our practice is we've allowed that to go forward, but council always has that option to say, no, I disagree, we should reconsider it. And then I would do that and call another vote. I've done that in the past too. So really it leaves it with the chair and the body. The body can always, anybody can say, no, that's not appropriate. But I think it hasn't happened that often immediately after a vote. But it has happened, is that right, Ms. Bauer? And we've seemed to handle it pretty good.
It has happened, and as you said, we've managed it by sometimes recalling the vote. If someone makes an honest mistake, then we honestly correct it.
But discussion after, I don't think council wants to go through
this more points toward discussion after and comments made.
Yeah.
Once something, I guess the intent is that once an item has been dealt with by council, we move on to the next item. And again, it's just efficiency. Okay, so if we go down to 916 now. Oh, okay.
Oh, sorry, yeah. I don't know who was first, but I'm going to start with Councillor Arneson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you. And I know that this is not the focus we've taken so far about this, so I would like some further clarification regarding this, because it falls under the category of rules of conduct and debate. So what I'm wondering was, what precedent do we have, or how do we understand this idea that if a council has made a decision, and not with respect to reconsideration, but the degree to which there could be comments made after the fact that council made a bad decision? Because I really think that this goes to the heart of what is being commented upon.
That's exactly what this actually means, is my understanding.
And then would it be the job of the chair?
The chair and council is a body.
Okay, so then the body could say, I object. Well, you can't say I object. What term would you use?
It's a term, it's a...
I know there's a term,
There
but
isn't, it's gone. Councillor Long says it all the time, and it's gone from my brain. Point of order? Point of order. There we go.
that's
Thank
the point.
you.
That's a point of order.
Yeah.
Okay, so then everything stops until the person makes their declaration of what they believe is a point of order, and then there has to be a ruling then.
As we've discussed before, point of order, the person calls the point of order, everything stops, the mayor asks the point of order, and then it is ruled upon. Of course, if the body does not agree with the chair, you can always challenge the chair on it.
Okay, so I agree with that, and I don't think it happens often enough, to be honest. But, if that's something the way that it is, I would prefer actually to keep it that way, because I think we need to be mindful of the fact of what that does when you're discussing and debating things, that in going back in time and criticizing the majority vote of council is not helpful. going forward. Thank you.
Councillor Ferguson?
Yeah, I don't think there's anything in this procedural bylaw that could, you know, solve the type of problem that I have. I always like to look at things as being like an evidence-based, you know, and when a member of council says they voted a certain way or did something, and you guys usually have on your screens the evidence. But when there's not a screen, there's not a recorded meeting, and somebody thinks they think you did a certain way, but the individual that said they didn't, there's nothing you guys can do about it. There's nothing in this bylaw that can change that. And that's my concern as a person who served on this council an awful long time.
I would say that if you believed the minutes were incorrect, it would be brought up at the next meeting, and then it would be on to council to vote a change to the minutes.
But there's nothing in this procedural bylaw that can evidence that, other than somebody recalls something.
Because it's a known method of putting forward that the draft minutes are incorrect. I don't think there's anything to speak to it in the bylaw. It's just, but, you know, procedurally, we always vote on the minutes at the next meeting. That's given so council can take the time to look at the minutes and ensure they're correct. If a council member feels the minutes aren't correct, then at the time of adoption of the minutes, they make an amendment, a standard amendment motion, just like all our other amendment motions, and then it's up to council to make the determination if that is the correction. So,
yeah, but that doesn't solve that, as long as the council has evidence. But if they have no evidence, then I'm not sure how you, other than providing it, as our friend Mr. Backen would say, go to court or something like that, and evidence it with people understand that they knew the information, they knew the date, the time, they knew what was said and everything else, because other than that would be evidence. But other than that, I don't think there's anything that this procedural bylaw that can solve that, my problem.
Yeah, Mayor Froese would like you to put his mic on. He's not able to respond.
Being that I sit there as the chair quite often, what I try and do, and I sometimes when there's like minutes and agendas go through fairly quickly, but I'll always read out those opposed. That's I think that's in our procedural bylaw, and it really is incumbent upon members of council, if they're opposed, to pay attention and make sure that their name got called. And so that's a routine. So I think I've done in every instance, or I may have missed once. I can't recall, but as the procedure bylaw says, call the vote, those in favor, those opposed, and I read out the names of those opposed. So it is also incumbent upon the member to pay attention and say, oh, I was opposed, and then that's what we just discussed. So certainly the process, and I think we had that where it comes back to council can make that decision. I'll certainly give my recollection as the chair of what happened, but it's always up to council, and hopefully that helps. We do have to be engaged in the meeting, I guess.
And the minutes are recorded as you said them.
Yeah,
that's the procedure, as the mayor calls who's opposed, and we record who's opposed in the minutes as they were stated.
Yeah.
But, you know, if I may, that's an easy answer, Mr. Mayor. That is so easy when we are in a public meeting and things are recorded and the actual vote goes up on screen. That's easy. That's the easiest thing we go. Well, but when we're not in a public meeting and there is no screen, there's no recording, and somebody, 4 members of council seem to think that that's not what happened. And that's where the evidence base, that's where I get upset about. Where's the evidence? Anyway, there's nothing in the procedural bylaws going to be able to solve this problem.
I don't believe that.
Maybe
I don't believe that can be solved that way. That
bringing
is
Mr.
simply,
Ledstone in or something to explain it to us. Pay attention. Because there ain't nobody in this room I think they can solve that problem.
The short answer is to, as the mayor said, he does announce who's opposed, and at the time it's incumbent upon council to ensure that he says their name. Moving down, actually.
I'm sorry. Well, I got Councillor Davis. Sorry.
Thank you.
Sorry, I don't want to complicate it here, but Council, I'm getting a little off track here.
Okay.
Could you just read 915?
The motion itself, or the...
We'll read the bold pieces there.
The bold piece. So no member may criticize any decision of council during a council meeting except for the purpose of moving that question to be reconsidered.
Okay. Now read exactly what's the very first decision of council, I can't pronounce that first name, that first word. So, what's that first word?
I'm sorry, I don't have the same copy.
Constitutes.
No, criticism?
Criticism? Yes.
Criticism. To me, criticism is, okay, it happened today. We talked about 204th and 80th, and we talked about the voting of it. And I don't want to start a peeing match, but sometimes there's things that councillors have to be able to say, but we didn't have Bob here, and I'm not making fun of this, but Bob does do a lot of, and he tries to keep things right on and sometimes it turns out to be an argument. But this 9.15, I don't think it's got a lot to do with whether or not you record an opposing vote or not. This is criticism, criticizing the decision. Councillor Arneson just said, at what timeline do you like, at the meeting, a week later, a year later? You should be able to, and now I'm going to throw it right out there, you should be able to say, hey, I believe that I can say, well, you guys voted for that. You know, what the Harry were you thinking? Okay. But on the other hand, this is that word, am I defying that wrong? Criticizing decisions of council. Or should we just be able to do that just before election? You know, I know I'm getting kind of silly here, but like where, and for the mayor, pardon me, for Mayor Froese to sit there and try to control this can be very, very difficult. And I know, and then all of a sudden he makes enemies. Well, you tried to shut me down. I wanted to talk about my cows. Okay, you know, all of a sudden it like, I don't know, this is a huge thing here. And it's also my right to say, oh, by the way, I didn't vote for that. You know, what's that?
If I may?
Yeah, I'm going on. Yeah, you got to shut me up.
I don't mean to shut you up. I just thought maybe I could help a little bit. You're right. The word is criticism. And a council member in a council meeting has the ability to say about a previous item, I would say not within the meeting as we want to move forward, but about a previous item that was voted against, I don't believe that's right. What they don't have the ability to do is criticize council for making that decision. So there's a difference between stating a fact and stating, well, a fact not nice.
Good point. Okay.
So I always look at this, and sorry, this is my, again, the Wendy simple way of looking at it. I had a grandmother who was born turn of the century, like the 18th to 19th century. She was a school teacher. If I said it and criticized people, I heard about it. So it's kind of that rule I live by my life. Fact is fine. I disagree with that. I don't think that was the right decision. Here's why I don't. What you don't want to start doing is criticizing council and calling people names and saying things like that. That's all this is about, is just saying, being respectful and being parliamentarian.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yes, she's a lovely lady.
Okay, we have Councillor Richter with her hand up.
Yeah, and I think that the mayor does have tools, because once the decision's been called, he can say to anybody who's trying to go back and revisit it, you have to move a reconsideration motion. And if there's an argument about that, then it's a matter of, will the chair's decision be upheld? So there is a way to deal with it. It's just a matter of how we deal with it. And that it's really in the mayor's hands, because he's the one who's running the meeting. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to move on to 916. I personally don't like this because of the history of how it got here, but I think it's a substantive one, so let's just leave it as it is.
If I can suggest, though, just to clarify it a bit, it does specify only social media, and it does specify while council is in progress. So it's not saying you can't use your phone for an emergency at home or whatever. All it's saying is that you shouldn't really, okay, I'm old, I use Facebook and Twitter and that's it, I'm not into everything else. All it's saying is that you're not doing social media posts while you're here. And I believe that, all due respect, Councillor Richter, I understand that. I also believe that if someone's taken the time to come and see council, that council should be engaged with what's going on, not figuring out if they should be putting it on social media. That's just my old-fashioned, I admit it, dragged into this century by the skin of my teeth.
Yeah, well, like I say, it's not worth debating now.
Okay.
Let the next council decide what they want to do.
Okay. That takes us down to.
Councillor Woodward had his hand.
Oh, good, thank you.
Oh, but it's down now. Are you still wanting to speak to that, Councillor Woodward?
Yeah, I'm just kind of curious so if we're gonna be expected to raise issues on each one as they go by, or do you want to wait until Councillor Richter's done and go back? Are we the intent here is to, because this one I did have a few thoughts on, but if we're just going to leave it to the next council, I'm fine with that too. I'm just trying to get some direction on the process here.
Okay. Ms. Bauer?
I'm good with whatever, or we can leave it to the next council. I'm totally open.
Because I do kind of agree with Councillor Richter. I'm not really sure why social media is ruled out. I don't make posts on social media, but I could also schedule them as well. So that's the problem, is the technology's kind of bypassed the council procedure bylaw here. I could schedule a post for Facebook to post it in the middle of a council meeting while paying direct attention to the resident that's delegating. So
I don't think that would cover this, honestly.
Technology's kind of passed this one by anyway. So, I think I'd just remove it. I think the origins of this were pretty obvious back in the day. I was in the audience when this was brought in, and it was silly at the time, and I think it's silly today.
Madam Chair, I think the question though was, do you seek to go through each one and have the comments there to close them off, or do you wish to go back and revisit them on a councillor by councillor basis? I think the answer is that each point should be revisited, should be concluded, and then move forward. And this one, as we can tell already, unless there's not a countervailing view, it has some contention to it. So what I heard is that this particular point would be something that could be put to the next council.
Okay.
But we've only heard from a couple of folks. If it's unanimous, then that's fine. But if there's any other sides, it would just be best to wait.
Okay, so I would say that we would continue on and put this one
I'd
to the
mark
next
that one
council.
down as going to next discussion.
Okay.
Councillor.
Okay, now, 9.21, this was a new one, and I wanted it in because it's not clear what the mayor can do if the assembly is unruly. And we witnessed that in Surrey this term. Mayor McCallum had such a contentious meeting, he actually got up and walked out of the room. So I'm thinking we need something in the bylaw about dealing with unruly assemblies, or does the mayor or whoever's running the meeting have a right already to just get up and walk out, like to adjourn, or do we have to specify that he has that right, or she, whoever the next mayor is?
I believe anything like that would need to be done by motion. Two thoughts on it. First of all, if they're unruly and it's dangerous, I am going to be under the desk behind Mr. Backen. It is the safest place to be. So if you look over and I'm gone, by all means, please think for your safety. Alternatively, I mean, and we can, does the chair?
Calling a recess.
Yeah, it would be like calling a recess. So we wouldn't so much as call it, unruly behavior. We would just simply quickly call a recess and then we would exit. Barring personal safety, recess would be the best way to go.
Okay, but do we have to have, I guess the question I'm asking is, do we have to have something in the actual procedure bylaw, or can the mayor just go ahead and do that anyway?
I think based on the fact that the mayor can call recess now, that's not a problem. It would just fall in the current pattern.
Okay.
Okay.
So call recess.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving to 10.07 now. That's on page 11.
And this one, I believe, is a motion could be withdrawn by the mover and the seconder. And actually, procedurally, it can't. Once a motion is on the floor, once it's on the floor, it is owned by council. So it is no longer owned by the mover or the seconder. It's simply there. So
Yeah.
to remove it for that, we can't do it. It actually takes a motion of council to remove something.
So that's not a housekeeping, that's
That's
just,
it's a can't do, actually.
it's a can't do, okay. Decided, move on, 10.08. Yeah, what constitutes sufficient debate? I think that Mayor Froese goes out of his way to ensure, or at least he has this term, absolutely, to ensure that everything has been discussed and everybody's had a fair opportunity to speak. So I don't know, is that something that we need to include?
At this
as
time, no.
housekeeping?
I
No?
would think at this time, no, based on if that could be interpreted by the next council.
Okay,
For what we have now, it seems to be working.
okay. And 09, the minutes must record the mover, the seconder. Yes, I want to keep 09 in.
Mhm.
Yeah. Because that is a measure of accountability that
And it
the
is
public
stated
has.
it is stated
Yeah.
in 12.02, so we're good there.
Yeah, okay. And, okay, 10.12, need to clarify the wording. Is this a substantive one or is it just a housekeeping one?
I think it would be fairly substantive.
Yeah,
Yep. We'll leave that one for the next council.
next council, okay. And 10.13, add special closed meetings as well. Oh, yeah, we've dealt with all that with the provisions that we've put in place under COVID, haven't we?
Yes, we have.
Yeah, so that's the next not needed. 10.16 on page 26.
So the 16 is the discussion about the use of unanimous consent. We use it for moving things along, minor changes, things like that. That would be to the will of council if we continue to use it. I feel it works quite well.
Yeah.
For what we use it for. It's not used for substantial matters, obviously. But
Yeah,
for
yeah.
moving forward, it seems to work well.
Okay, so not needed then. Okay, 11:02. Hey, we're making great progress here. Yeah.
Do I need to?
Is that a housekeeping one? Because it's just saying that we should also reference sections 911 and 1008.
I don't know that I mean, we can definitely put that in, but it seems to me that 11.2 is kind of standalone because it's important and it doesn't really, it's a thing. It's hard
Yeah.
to describe. It's just, it is there and it applies to the whole bylaw anyway. In the next version, we could probably put in some other notes, but I don't think that's really a change that we need to have at this time.
Okay.
Okay.
11:04. Simple majority, do we need to add the word simple in there?
I don't believe so. The community charter actually defines that nicely for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
We have no other option but what it says anyway.
11:05, abstention votes. We're not allowed to
Yeah,
abstain,
and
are we?
it is covered, and I think the reason that it ended up here was that more, not so much for council's understanding, but for public understanding. They may believe that councilors can abstain, and it just gave a touch point that we could go to and say, we can't abstain. If we don't vote, then it's considered affirmative.
Okay, so we don't need to add clarifying language in there saying we have to vote?
It's actually in the community charter already, so we can always point back to that.
Okay. All right. Oh yeah, this is the 5.
Yeah, and actually,
That is in 810, and what was 810 about? Have to flip back here.
Oh, my note here actually says we're unable to change 810 due to the community charter, so.
Oh, okay. Okay. So that's an X. 1107. Yeah, is this a housekeeping one where if you're going to disagree, you really should be stating why?
If you're disagreeing with the vote, no, the only way you can disagree with a vote would be that your vote wasn't, the mayor didn't call your name as opposed. So it's,
Okay.
What does that actually?
So this goes back maybe to the point Councillor Ferguson raised earlier.
yep.
Yeah.
But it's,
Okay.
but it's only immediately after the declaration of the chair. Yeah.
What is disposition of question? What does that actually mean?
Oh, that's calling the question and going through the process.
Okay,
So the closing of, essentially, the disposition is the closing of the question.
okay.
On 1108. Oh, yes, so we, housekeeping, the 2/3 majority vote of the members present.
I think that was, my note says it was previously corrected, actually, so.
It was?
Yeah.
Okay. Because it's in the version of the bylaw that I've got in front of me here, it doesn't say that. It just says.
I'll go back, I'll make sure it is fixed, but I thought it was, I'll double check on that one.
Okay, so you're gonna. Okay. It's the one, it just adds it. In the copy I've got here. Okay. 1201. Yeah, allegedly and accurately recorded. I think we get that actually, or this council has been dealing with it when we approved the minutes of the previous meeting.
Yes, we've been doing very well with it, and especially like yourself and Councillor Woodward and some others, as you know, as their motions comes forward, email is a beautiful thing. We can actually quickly get it in. But there are some good things that have come out of Zoom and COVID and a few things like that. And I think one of the things is the ability we have to, you know, get the main part of the motions better.
Yeah. The substantive part of this, though, has to deal, I think, with the in the special closed meetings, because we don't do any audio or videotaping in those meetings. And that's something that maybe the next council wants to talk about.
Yeah, or the other option, if we forgo that, would be that having council members provide the motion that they would like in writing, so we have a record of what exactly they wanted. Anything like that can be done and modified.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
Madam
So
Chair, I had a question.
Oh, Councillor Ferguson.
Okay, yeah, I think Councillor Richter has hit the nail on the head about the fact, you know, if we don't have recorded meetings or other things, how do we know for sure if everything was accurate? And I know the clerk and their team 99.9% of the time does an excellent job. It's the one time that my question is, I'm going to go beyond our bylaw, if I may. We're a child of the province, right?
Yes, we are.
Okay, so that's good to know. If we feel that this council has not enacted something properly or voted properly, or there's been an error or a question, are we as a member of council or a council as a group able to consult the province?
I would say consulting the province on procedural matters is not generally done. We'd probably start with legal counsel first, and go that way. I've never heard of someone going to the province to procedurally discuss councils. That's why the province has instituted that we have to have a procedure bylaw. So it's kind of, because they've said we have to have a procedure bylaw, they've basically said council has to manage themselves. So the interpretation of the procedure bylaw we would probably go to legal counsel first to see if we've interpreted everything correctly with the community charter and the procedure bylaw.
It's just the trouble is, I'm not one person likes to spend a lot of money on legal stuff. I'm different than most people at this table probably, because over the last 8 years, you guys have spent a lot of money on legal stuff. So the thing is, I was just wondering if we could get sometime if this council or any other council could ask the province, just, hey, listen, we have a question on this. Are we able to do that, or?
We can try. I can't guarantee, depending on the situation. Like if I called them this week and asked them a question, I'm pretty sure they'd tell me there was a flood. But we're willing to try. I just don't know.
Wendy, more so when we do ask procedural questions, they refer us back to our procedure bylaw.
Yes, they do.
And then our own legal counsel. So it's a bit like providing opinions from CRA. They don't do so. They may give you, you may request something in writing, but it would take a long time to get it. And the answer quite often is we refer you back to your procedure bylaw.
I mean, I guess that's, it always comes back to the fact is, sometimes it's through a chair, if you don't have the evidence, or it's not evidence-based, it must be very, very difficult to prove things, other than, as Ms. Bauer says, talk to the province or talk to those. I just always refer back to Mr. Lidstone, because over the years, he's helped us with some procedural matters that have been challenging.
But again, that would be to the will of council as to recognizing what happened and making the recommendation and asking the questions.
Okay, that's half it.
Okay, so I believe we can move forward?
Yeah, 12.01E, information on where corrections to prior minutes will be recorded. I know that if I raise a correction to the minutes, you say that that will be done, but where does it go after you say that will be done?
Oh, literally, we change the draft minutes and they're amended before they go to the mayor.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So does that need to be specified in here as housekeeping?
I don't believe so, in that the motion itself, and thank you very much for the few times, the times you've caught us with our typing mistakes and stuff that we've missed after 40 people have read them. It's really helpful. Those ones we just correct. I don't think, because it's a motion of council for a majority of them, I don't think we need, it's just an understanding that those minutes are adopted as changed, and we make sure the right ones go forward.
Okay. And then 1202, it says the names of the movers and seconders will be recorded in the minutes. We also record the names of the members opposed to the motion. Should that be included in here? That to me is a housekeeping thing, because it does reflect our actual practice.
I believe it's already specified in 10.09, pardon me.
10.09.
Yeah, members voting in opposition to the motion shall have their names recorded.
Okay. So that's in 10.09. Okay, the official record, 12.03. Does it need to have the words, again, this is a housekeeping one, once approved shall be? The written minutes, once approved, shall be considered the official record.
Well, no, because they're draft until they're approved. The written minute shall be considered. That, yeah, I can see where maybe we could clarify that.
Okay.
I assumed it was understood, but we could definitely put that in there.
1204, again, the business about accurately recorded. I don't think that's needed. I think
I'm sorry, can I go back? I just want to clarify 12.03. Rather than written, can I change that to the signed? So the written minutes, or the minutes signed by the mayor and the clerk shall be the official record.
Okay, sure.
Okay, because that actually helps me going forward as far as technology goes. That means the official is the one copy that's signed and we store and is, okay, perfect, thank you. That actually really helps with technology, come to think of it. Oops.
Okay, 1204, we don't need to deal with. We already talked about that earlier. 1205. Now, do we need to add in something that corresponds to what's in section 605? Again, this would be a housekeeping thing. By 6 p.m. on the 4th calendar day prior to. No, prior to getting a special meeting. The 3rd calendar day prior to the meeting.
Oh, okay, so we're essentially, in this case, you'd be moving it back by a day? So from the 3rd?
Yeah, that's a substantive
yeah,
thing,
that-
because, that's
that-
next council.
Yeah, that would cause a chain reaction further back than I think we're really willing to go at this point.
Right. 1208, the minutes feed may be adopted by the resolution of the council without being read to the meeting. Oh, yeah.
I think that's one of those ones that's kind of still there just as tradition dictates. Procedurally, if you go back to Robert's Rules of Order, you actually have to read them into the agenda unless, of course, someone makes a motion not to. So this just kind of blanket covers everything as the minutes don't need to be read in.
So, but do we actually need to have it, or?
It doesn't hurt, I guess is
Yeah.
the way I look at it.
Okay. All right, 1209. The error will be rectified by resolution. What did I want there? To allow transcripts of the meeting and audio videotapes to be checked. I don't think that's needed. I think
No.
that if a correction's made, you check it anyway, right?
Yep, we do.
Yeah. Okay.
So the section on
13.
delegations would be pretty substantive if we went back over it. We did, however, from the original time we went through this bylaw, rejig the delegations with the help of Mr. Lidstone.
Yeah.
At this point, it seems to be functioning much better than it was. We have far more transparency than we ever had before for people. People don't sneak things in coming to the agenda. So we have a much better handle on all of that now.
Yeah, and I agree that is something that is substantive and should go to the next council if they want to change what's in place already.
Definitely, yeah.
1302. Yeah, and that's 1302. That's the same thing. That's all part of the delete delegations, right? Okay, approval of delegation applications. That's 1304. First sentence. Yeah, I thought it should be councils, but it probably is your job, right? The
Yeah, my job
township
is
clerk's
to use the bylaw to make those decisions. So
Yeah.
it is council by virtue of the fact that the bylaw is approved, and I just follow the rules.
Okay. So that's not needed then, 1304. Oh, I see Councillor Whitmarsh has his hand up.
Oh, good. Councillor Whitmarsh.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if maybe this whole section on delegations, part 13, I think each one of them could be substantive, and I'm wondering if maybe this section is referred to the next council.
We could do that. And I think that does make some sense in that it is up to each council to determine how they're going to manage delegations and take input.
Yeah, I'm thinking whether it's around proclamations or petitions or referrals to staff, I think anything of those related could be substantive, so it seems this whole section 13 is probably best left in my recommendation.
Councillor Ferguson, yes, no?
Oh, yeah, I actually have a quick question, yeah. So I don't think you've denied any delegation this term, correct?
I have.
No, we had COVID and everything.
Yeah,
Who knows?
I had denied one because the gentleman wanted to come back in the same quarter, so he came back a quarter later. Because we have a limit, so you can appear once every quarter, and he was coming back on the same topic within the time period, so I just suggested to him that it would be better, well, it would be allowable in the next time period, but not this time period.
So, yeah, but he did appear once,
Yes, he did.
right?
Yes.
But there's nobody that's been actually outright denied. No, that was last term, right?
That was last term, and that was because it was political, and I
With
would.
me.
Yep. And I would do it
I
again.
got all sorts of history for you guys. Mayor can deny a person from being a member of council, isn't that correct?
There is no way to remove a sitting councillor unless it goes through the courts, so no, actually, he can't.
Okay, so we're going to take all of this Part
Okay.
13 delegation stuff, as Councillor Whitmarsh has suggested, leave it as it is and
So that
refer it
takes
to the
us
next
to-
council.
That takes us to 14.05. Or did I miss one?
14.01.
14.01.
Oh, yeah, I missed one. Sorry, that was the bottom of my page.
And divided into sections. Is there a clarification that's needed there? I think is what I'm really getting at.
I think it's going to the community charter. The community charter is divided into sections, so we've essentially used the model that they've given us.
Okay.
And all our bylaws are done that way.
Okay. And abandoned bylaw.
We
Is
actually
this ever, like, why do we have, because it's
we
never
actually
happened?
have them because well, we kind of have to. So adopted bylaw is fairly self-evident. It's adopted. An abandoned bylaw is a bylaw that has come to council and received a reading, and then council has to formally abandon it in order to take it off the books and let us process it. And not proceeded with is a bylaw number that staff has requested and never got to council, or when it did come to council, did not have first or second reading. So I learned that from a lovely gentleman clerk in Richmond who was very, very, very strict on how we, when I was a records clerk, telling us how we had to stamp bylaws, because there was the three of them and they did actually have differences.
So we'll just scratch that one too.
Yeah, that works.
Okay, 1501, do we need a second sentence? There. So in the absence of a specific rule in the procedures bylaw, the default position is Robert's Rules of Order.
That would be the determination of council if they wanted to use Robert's Rule of Order as well. I tend to use it for guidance when I looking up how to handle something, but formally we don't acknowledge Robert's Rule of Order. It would be, I think that would be more of a substantial discussion of council.
Okay, so that's an ex-council then.
Oh, we have Mayor froze.
Yeah, so for next council, so I don't want to get too deep into it, but the procedural bylaw, for me at least as chair, when I was brand new at this, having this document as the document to follow, and then if you layered on top of that the thick Robert's Rules of Order, which I did look at, but it gets extremely complicated for a chair. I think this actual procedural bylaw is fairly straightforward, and so I don't know if you want to take it to the next. I suppose it'll be brought up at the next council anyway. So it's a good discussion, but I know that as chairing me, this works.
Yeah.
This works well. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it should go to the next council if they want to reference it or not. It is substantive. And the system that we're used now, where if there's a question on procedure that you can't answer, Mr. Mayor, you refer it to Ms. Bauer and she gives you an answer based on her knowledge and skill sets. So that seems to be working for us.
Me advice, and I then make a decision based on her advice, and generally I follow what Ms. Bauer has to say.
Yeah.
She's never wrong.
Oh, no, don't say that. I can't live up to that.
So section or part 16 now, 1606. Which one is 1606? There is no 1606 in the copy that
I think
I've
you
got.
added it.
Oh.
Yeah.
I added? Okay.
There was a suggestion to add it.
Yeah, okay. Oh, it was removed.
Oh, okay. Oh, here we go. It was removed by CPC April 15th, 2019. So
Yeah.
it's already been removed. That makes life easy.
Okay. It was removed to the council before the contract is executed. So is that wording in there now?
I don't believe it is, and the reason in looking at the committee proceed or the community charter, there we go. We actually can't go further than the charter says. The charter
Yeah.
says that it has to be reported, but it does not specify before or after, so we'd be unable to do that.
Okay. Beyond charter, okay. And then my suggestion for a new section, 1607. Okay, yeah, that's next council.
Yeah.
That's Robert's rules. Okay, so Appendix A. Well, these things have all changed with the
Yes.
with the COVID situation. So I'm assuming that once the COVID situation is done, there'll be changes that'll come back, and who knows if it'll be to this council or the next council.
Unfortunately,
So
yes.
I'm guessing that should just go to the next council, right?
We're gonna have to, when this is all over, assuming
Yeah.
it's going to be over, we'll look at, you know, the best parts that worked and the parts that didn't, and we're gonna do something totally different again.
Yeah. Okay, the protocol for the public hearings, unless council resolves to give third reading. Well, we're already doing this, aren't we?
Mhm.
Yeah. So
at this point, I think it stays, and the next council can determine if they'd like to keep it or if they'd like
if
to do
they
something
if
different.
they don't, okay. And Appendix C, secondary motions. Oh, the unanimous consent. Yeah, that's next council if they want to deal with that. And the glossary of terms, was there anything in there that needs to be clarified from your perspective?
No, I think at this point, they're kind of self-explanatory and do what we need them to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we don't have to add requires a second or anything like that?
No, that's, no, it doesn't, it's just, if it's a motion, it kind of has to follow a certain way.
Yeah, okay. And then the last set of comments here, I think, open, we operate differently in closed than in open. Yeah, although we've started to shift that a bit, where the mayor is allowing people to discuss things before he asks for the motion to be put on the table or to ask questions. Yes. That system seems to be working quite well for this council.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it would be a decision of the next council if they wanted to continue on with that, right?
Mayor Froese has a question? Or
Yeah.
Let's comment on that. I know it's part of the experience of being chair from day one to 10 years into it. I tend to go, and it's always up to council to, really I'm the chair of this body and the body can make decisions. But, I know there's a respect for the chair and the chair to carry out. But what I try and do is if there's a presentation by staff or especially when we're going through reports, I guess there's that how you chair a meeting. If there's a report, and let council ask questions of staff on the report so that doesn't take away from their time when we have the motion to receive or endorse or approve the report. And I've seen that in a lot of other boards I attend to, and I think that works. When we get to the readings, I think they're pretty self-explanatory. We put the reading on the table, it's move second, move on. But when there's a presentation like we had today, council can ask questions. When there's a report, we see a lot of reports come close and open. If it looks like something that's just going to go through, and there might be one question, we move it. It's just expedient to move it, second it. Sure, have your question or your debate. But if it's going to be something substantive like we've seen today, I try and navigate through that. But it's always up. Council can always help me out with that too, because it's one of those. How do you, as a chair, you have to move the meeting along to get to the end and be efficient. In the same time, allowing council members of the board or the council to have their opportunity to ask questions of staff and then have proper debate. So I don't know, there's procedures, but there's art to this whole thing. And I don't know, anybody who's ever chaired a meeting, I think, realizes the same thing. So I try my best, but again, I'm happy to take direction from council. This is council's procedure by law. Hopefully that helps. I don't know. A lot of it's experience. 10 years has helped.
Well, yeah, and I like the way that this has worked for this council. I'm hopeful that process will carry forward to future councils. But I think it's the future council's decision on how they want to run their own meetings, right? And maybe, Mr. Mayor, if you ever decide to retire, you should take up a sideline on mentoring new mayors on how to run meetings.
Parliamentarian.
Oh, yeah, you can become a registered parliamentarian.
Yeah. Okay, so 19, 1 and 2, both next council, if they want to change it. It's substantive. What we've got now is working for us.
Okay.
Wow. Did we get to the end?
We did.
Yeah.
Woohoo.
Good.
Look at us go.
So I guess we need a motion now to refer the housekeeping changes to the clerk to bring any necessary amendments forward.
And I'll do that I was actually waiting to have this discussion so we can bring forward the changes to the procedure for the public hearing to allow electronic participation. So council gave me direction on that one before, and I'll just encompass those into this and bring that all forward.
So,
Okay.
Okay, Mayor
So
Frost
you don't
seconds.
need a formal motion on that
A
then?
formal motion would be helpful. That way we know.
Okay,
exactly.
I'll make the motion that we refer these housekeeping changes to the clerk to bring forward to the next meeting of council.
Okay, and Mayor Frost seconds. So I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? It's unanimous. So we will move on to other business. Is there any other business?
Move termination.
All right. May I have a motion to terminate? All right. All in favor? Opposed? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy.
Yeah.
Or I mean,
Yeah,
Ms. Bauer.
enjoy your lunch, guys. And we've got the afternoon off now. Lovely.